Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. The moon sat high in the sky, casting pale light across the sprawling pine forest that lay between two rival territories. This stretch of woodland had been called the Killing Grounds for more years than any living wolf could remember, its name etched in local legend and soaked in enough blood to earn its dark reputation. At the edge of this forest, the Night Fang pack kept a close watch for intruders, always braced for the next onslaught from their sworn enemies, the Blood Moon pack. The hatred between these two packs ran deeper than shared borders or old grudges. Generations had passed since the first feud began, and the hostility had only grown more bitter with time. Marisol, the only daughter of the Night Fang Alpha, stood guard upon a natural ledge overlooking the tree line. Her presence was a familiar sight for those who patrolled with her, as she was entrusted with high responsibility despite her relatively young age. She had been born with a gift for sensing danger, a trait that made her all the more valuable in defense of Night Fang territory. Though her father had once claimed she possessed a calm spirit, shaped by the careful mentorship of her warrior mother, Marisol believed her edge came from necessity. She had spent her childhood memorizing every detail of Blood Moon tactics, carefully studying the history of each Night Fang battle so she could anticipate the next ambush. Every lesson her father taught her culminated in one stark directive: to eradicate the Blood Moon Alpha's bloodline by any means necessary. Night Fang wolves whispered tales of the monstrous legacy that coursed through the veins of their enemy's heir. The Blood Moon pack was infamous for its cunning and cruelty, forging alliances whenever it suited them and then breaking those bonds at the first opportunity. Yet they had grown powerful, strong enough to threaten Night Fang dominance. Marisol had been trained from a tender age to believe that every Blood Moon wolf posed a direct danger to her pack, and the heir would be the worst of them all, a figure rumored to be cunning, vicious, and merciless. She carried that knowledge like a shield, determined that if fate allowed her to meet him on the battlefield, she would show no mercy in finishing what her ancestors had begun. But on this cold night, she had no way of knowing her life's path was about to diverge in ways she never could have imagined. Silvery moonbeams glinted across her armor as she surveyed the land. She wore form-fitting black leather that made her frame appear lean and imposing. Her breathing was steady, her senses alert to every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig. A single strand of her dark hair escaped the tie at the base of her neck, brushing her cheek in the breeze. She silently willed the night to bring her any sign of trespassers. Her father had cautioned that infiltration was Blood Moon's favored tactic, sneaking across the border under cover of darkness. The older warriors near her kept calm, but Marisol sensed an unsettling tension rising, as if the forest itself trembled with possibility. Suddenly, the faint scent of foreign wolves permeated the air, sharp and musky. Instantly, her instincts roared to life. She lifted her hand, signaling the others to remain silent. Concentrating, she zeroed in on the direction of the odor and let her heightened hearing pick up any murmur of movement. A twig cracked, and she knew in that moment the incursion was real. Years of training propelled her into motion. She gestured for half the group to go left and circle around, while the others spread out to create a flank. Marisol moved swiftly along the ledge, descending through a narrow ravine to position herself near the heart of the intrusion. She wanted to confirm how many had entered and whether the Blood Moon heir was among them. If he was, she intended to confront him tonight. The forest floor felt like an old ally beneath her feet. She advanced with silent footsteps, leaves barely crunching. The rest of her patrol vanished between towering trunks, each pair or trio carrying crossbows loaded with silver-tipped arrows. From the stories told by elders, silver did not kill a werewolf the way folklore suggested, but it burned enough to weaken them in a fight. At close range, it gave the Nightfang wolves a vital advantage. Every inch of Marisol's body vibrated with readiness, her nerves coiled tight. The faint swirl of scents intensified, a reminder of how close the threat truly was. After a few minutes of tense movement, she spotted a flicker of movement behind a wide oak. Her mouth went dry, and her heartbeat thumped in her ears. She could see the outline of a tall wolf shifter, muscles taut under a thin shirt, scanning the perimeter as if expecting resistance. Another figure stood a short distance away. They seemed organized, communicating with subtle hand gestures. Marisol crouched behind a cluster of undergrowth. She could just make out two faces in the darkness, neither of them matching the rumored descriptions of the infamous heir. One had a narrow nose and a scar cutting across his brow. The other was shorter, no less muscular, but uncertain and tense. These were likely scouts, testing the boundaries, perhaps preparing for a larger infiltration. With a silent signal, she waited for her team to take positions on the flanks. She pointed to the watchers, indicating that these scouts should be apprehended swiftly. Yet her mind raced ahead. If they were scouts, the main group could be lurking right behind them, possibly including the Blood Moon Alpha's son. Rather than reveal herself too soon, she let her patrol coordinate the capture. Swiftly, as silent as predators in the night, her warriors pounced. A brief scuffle ensued, ending with the startled scouts disarmed, pinned to the ground by Nightfang warriors. Even in the faint moonlight, Marisol saw the fear shining in their eyes. It surprised her to see how young they were. The shorter one looked barely older than she was, though he bore a mark of the Blood Moon crest on his arm. Her father had warned her never to show empathy, but something flickered in her heart all the same. She promptly dismissed the sentiment. Empathy, in this place, would mean weakness. Standing tall, she strode over, the hush of the forest crowding around them all. She met the gaze of the scouts, her expression giving nothing away as she asked in a low tone, "State your reason for crossing into Nightfang territory." She already knew the answer, but she wanted to gauge their reaction. The smaller scout spat at the ground, refusing to speak, though his trembling betrayed him. The taller man growled in defiance. One of her older warriors, a veteran named Bram, pressed a forearm down on the shorter scout's shoulder. "You'll tell us what you came for," he muttered, voice dripping with the quiet threat that decades of conflict had ingrained in him. The taller Blood Moon scout snarled in frustration. "We were just told to observe and return with any intelligence. That's all we know." The slight tremor in his voice revealed more fear than bravado. Marisol's eyes flashed with cold determination. "If you're lying, your next breath will be your last. Who is leading your party?" she demanded, giving no room for hesitation. It was possible the heir was somewhere among the trees, maybe watching them even now. The idea made her pulse quicken. She had envisioned their meeting countless times in her head. She had fantasized that she would be the one to bring him down, delivering the final blow that would ensure the Blood Moon line ended. "We were under the orders of Beta Ryson," the tall man stammered. "Please, I speak the truth," she scowled, dissatisfaction twisting her features. Beta Ryson was second in command of the Blood Moon Pack, which made sense for such a mission. But no one else seemed to be in the vicinity. No sign of the heir? She wondered silently, searching the shadows. Unless he was hidden in the darkness, tonight was apparently not the time for that fateful confrontation. She tried to quash the small ember of disappointment that flared within her. She turned to Bram. "Take them back to the den. We'll get more answers there. Post extra guards along the northern border in case this was a distraction. Bram nodded, gesturing for 2 other warriors to help him. The scouts were hauled to their feet, and the group began the trek toward the Nightfang den. Marisol lingered behind a moment to verify there were no other scents or sign of additional intruders. Once satisfied, she shifted into her wolf form, shaking out her sleek fur. She let the primal rush of her senses wash over her, the forest brightening under her lupine vision. She raised her muzzle to the sky, taking one final survey with her sharper nose. Only faint traces of the blood moon scent remained, fading into the wind. Confident that the threat was contained for the moment, she sprinted in fluid strides to rejoin her patrol. Nightfang territory spread out from a massive, ancient cedar at the center of a hidden valley. Tunnels and cave dwellings were carved into the hills, creating a secure community that could withstand sieges. Guard towers perched on higher elevations, interconnected by winding pathways lined with torches. At the heart of the settlement was the Alpha's residence, an impressive structure composed of carved stone and wooden beams. The place felt as unyielding as the pack's pride. After shifting back to her human form and dressing in warm clothes, Marisol strode into the main hall. Torches flickered against polished timber walls, illuminating rows of trophies from past wars. A constant reminder of the Nightfang Pack's tumultuous legacy. Her father stood waiting by a long table strewn with maps, strategic notes, and etched diagrams. Alpha Gideon's stern features conveyed a relentless ambition that was only magnified by the silver threads beginning to show at his temples. He was an imposing figure, tall and broad, with the same intense gray eyes that Marisol had inherited. Behind him, older ranked wolves studied the territory lines, whispering about fortifications and possible infiltration routes. The moment he saw Marisol enter, his gaze locked onto her. "Report," he commanded, his voice sharp and laced with impatience. "We intercepted 2 scouts," Marisol answered, crossing the floor with measured steps. "They claimed they were sent by Beta Ryson. No sign of the Blood Moon Alpha's son." She dropped her voice slightly, aware that her father's unspoken goal was for her to kill that particular wolf. Bringing that proof of his end would bring the Nightfang Pack to the pinnacle of triumph in Gideon's eyes. Alpha Gideon rubbed his jaw in thought. "That dog won't dare set foot here unless he wants a battle he can't win," he said, referring to the Blood Moon heir. He gestured to one of the older warriors. "Increase patrols on all sides. We can't risk any infiltration." He then fixed his focus on Marisol, studying her carefully. "Were there casualties?" She shook her head. "None, father. We secured the prisoners. They're being held in the lower cells. We'll interrogate them further to see if they know anything of significance." He seemed mildly satisfied by that. "Good. You handled it well. But I can't help noticing your tone. Are you disappointed you didn't get to face him tonight?" She bristled at his question, uncertain how to respond without giving away her tangled feelings. "I've trained for that confrontation my entire life," she finally said, keeping her voice even. "Part of me wanted the chance to prove myself." Her father's expression hardened, though a flicker of pride shone in his eyes. "You'll have your chance. Be patient." Then he dismissed her, turning back to discuss strategy with the older wolves. Marisol left the hall, her mind spinning as she walked through corridors lit by wall sconces and the occasional candelabra. She had lived in these tunnels since birth. She knew every twist and turn, every hidden nook. Yet the sense of claustrophobia closed in at times, as if the entire fortress threatened to confine her. She understood, though, that the pack had no choice but to remain vigilant and protected. She considered the possibility that Blood Moon might try a larger offensive soon. Gideon never took chances, so he would counter by sending out scouting parties, possibly even a retaliation to keep them off balance. She knew the cycle well. Hatred feeding upon hatred, until the next confrontation erupted. She finally arrived at her chamber near the southern exit of the dens, a relatively small space containing only the essentials, a bed, a simple dresser, and a broad trunk holding her gear. She sank onto the bed, exhaling the tension that had built during the night's events. In her mind, she replayed that brief clash in the forest. Two frightened scouts, obviously outmatched. It felt less like a triumph and more like a stepping stone. Her entire existence had been devoted to ensuring that the Blood Moon heir would fall by her hand. She had pictured him as a looming figure of terror, an embodiment of evil itself. Her father had woven countless tales of how cunning the Blood Moon Alpha's son was rumored to be, how savage he was in combat. And yet, in the silence of her room, Marisol felt a strange twinge in her chest, an unnameable unease that made her wonder if her unwavering hatred would suffice to carry her through a destiny that demanded such violence. She shook off the thought, reminding herself of the vow she had made to her father and to the entire Nightfang pack. Someone had to shoulder this burden to protect her people, and that someone was her. If she defeated the Blood Moon heir, their greatest threat would be ended. The endless cycle of bloodshed might finally stop. She willed herself to accept the weight of that responsibility, for there was no turning back. The following days brought more watchfulness, more patrols. The tension in the air remained thick. It was as though the forest itself braced for a coming storm. Scouts returned with reports that the Blood Moon pack had gathered more forces near the border, though no one had glimpsed the heir yet. The captives locked in the Nightfang cells had yielded little more information than they had initially volunteered, and Gideon was growing restless. Marisol found herself increasingly caught up in the swirl of speculation. She spent long hours sparring with her fellow warriors to keep her mind focused, but an undercurrent of anticipation coursed through her, as if an unseen clock were ticking toward a monumental clash. At last, rumors spread that a Blood Moon hunting party had been sighted in the southwestern quadrant of Nightfang territory, near the broad meadow that sloped into a series of rocky hills. The southwestern hills were strategic for vantage points, so it came as no surprise that Blood Moon wolves might want to seize the opportunity to scout them. Alpha Gideon immediately dispatched Marisol and a dozen of the strongest fighters to intervene. They rode on horseback part of the way, then dismounted to make a swift approach on foot. The sun was setting by the time they reached the rolling meadow, its tall grasses rippling in the dying light. A sense of stillness blanketed the terrain, but the subtle tang of Blood Moon scent told Marisol they weren't alone. She directed the group to spread out and advance in a crescent formation. Wispy clouds passed overhead, bathing the grass in an otherworldly glow. A hush fell over the meadow as Marisol slowed her pace, every muscle coiled with readiness. That was when she saw him. At first, he was just a silhouette at the crest of a small hill. Broad-shouldered, with a powerful stance that spoke of confidence and something else, a latent threat, her heart pounded against her ribs. She realized the figure was accompanied by several other wolves, all shifting in restless anticipation. She couldn't quite make out his features in the waning light, but something in her gut told her that this man was not just any soldier. An electrifying certainty rippled along her nerves. Could it be him? The Blood Moon Alpha's son, the heir she had trained her whole life to kill? She inhaled deeply, letting her keen senses sharpen on that shape. The night breeze carried a faint trace of a masculine scent, laced with the crisp tang of pine. To her surprise, it wasn't an oppressive odor. Instead, it was strangely appealing, clean and potent. She forced herself to focus, ignoring the unusual reaction it stirred. A small knot of tension formed in her stomach as the figure turned his head in her direction, obviously sensing her presence. She gave the signal for her warriors to converge. Her plan was to corner them, forcing them to either fight or surrender. All at once, the meadow erupted into chaos. Nightfang wolves burst out of the tall grass, fanning out like a well-rehearsed tactic. The Blood Moon party responded instantly, revealing long knives or shifting into wolf form. The clash of metal and the snarling of beasts filled the air. Marisol sprinted forward, adrenaline throbbing through her veins. She ducked a wild slash from a Blood Moon wolf and countered with a swift strike to his jaw. He staggered, collapsing into the grass. Another lunged at her with snapping teeth. She pivoted, delivering a punishing blow that knocked him aside. Even as she fought, her eyes kept drifting to the tall figure on the hill. He was in human form, engaged in a vicious fight with two of her warriors. With lethal grace, he parried their attacks, his reflexes almost preternatural. She saw her fellow Nightfangs struggle against his prowess. Realizing they were outmatched, she dashed across the battlefield, determined to intervene and end him if he truly was the heir. This was her moment, the culmination of her life's training. She whispered a prayer to whatever deity might be listening, for victory, for her pack, for the end of this bloody feud. A surge of near-dizzying awareness coursed through her as she closed the distance. The intangible pull became stronger the closer she got, an inexplicable magnetism beckoning her. She clamped down on any confusing emotions, focusing only on her mission. Drawing a curved blade, she lunged at the tall warrior. He spun to face her, and for an instant her eyes met the most striking amber gaze she had ever seen. Her breath caught in her throat, a sudden wave of warmth spreading across her chest. The world seemed to spin as her wolf stirred restlessly within her, not in aggression, but in shocking recognition. Time slowed to a near standstill. She had fought countless battles, yet never had she hesitated like this. The man's scent overwhelmed her with unexpected intensity. She locked eyes with him, and a jolt of energy made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Her wolf let out a sound that was half growl, half whimper, and a single word roared through her mind. Mate. Her mind reeled in confusion and horror. This was impossible. Fate could not be so cruel. She tried to shake off the feeling, snapping back into combat readiness, but her hesitation cost her the advantage. The man pivoted, grasping her wrist before her blade could strike. He twisted, forcing her to drop the weapon. She responded with a swift kick, but he blocked it with his forearm. Their eyes locked again, and she could see the shock in his face mirroring her own. She felt a pounding in her head that wasn't fear. It was an awareness, an undeniable truth forging a bond she had always believed existed only for others. Mate. The word rattled inside her skull, refusing to be ignored. She tore herself away from his gaze long enough to break free of his hold, stepping back in a defensive stance. Her pack mates were still battling the other Blood Moon wolves, but it seemed both sides were too occupied to notice the moment of deadlock between these two powerful warriors. For the briefest heartbeat, they both stood there, breathing heavily, fighting the strangest compulsion to do anything but kill one another. She tried to summon the hatred that had been her guiding force, reminding herself of the vow she had made. She was supposed to end this man. In her eyes, he was the worst of her enemies. Yet she found her hands trembling in a way that no battle had ever made them tremble before. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice wavering slightly. Her eyes narrowed, struggling to keep her inner turmoil hidden. His jaw tensed, and he pressed a hand against a shallow cut on his arm. "You know who I am," he replied in a resonant tone that sent shivers racing down her spine. "I'm the Blood Moon Alpha's son, and you must be the daughter of the Nightfang Alpha." The wind howled softly across the battlefield, as if the very elements paused to witness this confrontation. Her heart hammered against her rib cage, torn between duty and a primal bond that she had never believed would link her to such an enemy. She could almost sense his wolf straining within him, wanting to claim something from her soul. She swallowed hard, forcing words past the knot in her throat. "Then, we were both raised to hate each other. I've spent my life training to kill you." His amber eyes darkened with conflict. He glanced at the scuffles around them, as if uncertain whether to continue fighting or to retreat. "And now, we find out the spirits have played a cruel trick," he said. Each syllable weighted with the same disbelief that coursed through her. "You are my fated mate." Hearing the words spoken aloud made her stomach twist in knots. They resounded with an unavoidable finality, and for a moment she forgot the violence surrounding them. This was the son of her father's most hated rival. She was supposed to protect her people from him. Instead, an ancient cosmic force had chosen to bind them together. She wanted to scream at the sky, to demand an explanation for why fate would thrust such a burden on her. Before she could respond, the chaos of the skirmish crashed back in on them. A group of Nightfang wolves converged near the pair, spotting the air at last. One bellowed, "Marisol, take him down." Another lunged at the Blood Moon male, snarling furiously. Instinctively, she leapt forward to knock her own packmate aside. She wasn't sure if she was protecting her target or simply interfering out of a sense of confusion. Her comrade glared at her, astonished. The Blood Moon warrior seized the opportunity to shift into his wolf form, a massive gray beast rippling with muscle. He let out a powerful howl, summoning the rest of his pack. In a whirlwind of motion, he and the remaining Blood Moon wolves broke from the fight, retreating into the tall grass with uncanny speed. Nightfang fighters gave chase, but the Blood Moon group vanished into the darkness, leaving behind the wounded and dead. Marisol stood frozen, her wolf howling in confusion inside her mind. She could barely breathe, every emotion surging in a tangled rush. One of her fellow Nightfangs grabbed her by the shoulder. "Did you see him? That must have been their heir," he exclaimed. "We had a chance to kill him, and he got away." She swallowed against the dryness in her throat, chest tight with conflicting loyalties. "He was stronger than we expected," she managed to say, hoping her voice sounded steady. "We'll have to prepare for whatever retaliation they plan next." She felt her packmate studying her, trying to make sense of her hesitation. She offered no further explanation. When they returned to Nightfang territory that night, a heavy silence settled over them. They had lost 2 warriors in the fight, while the Blood Moon side likely suffered casualties as well. Marisol gave her report to her father, carefully omitting the revelation of the mate bond. She found it impossible to speak of. For all she knew, it could be some trick, an illusion conjured to weaken her resolve. Maybe the bond was mistaken. Yet even as she considered that possibility, she remembered the jolt of recognition when their eyes locked, the electricity that thrilled in her veins. She had heard stories of fated mates, though they were relatively rare, and never had she envisioned that fate might pair her with someone from the very pack she had sworn to annihilate. As the night deepened and the sorrow of loss weighed on the fortress, she slipped away to her chamber. The question looped endlessly in her mind. What did fate want with them? If she accepted that he was her mate, then everything she had believed, everything she had fought for, would be twisted into an unrecognizable shape. Could love for her enemy's heir truly be stronger than the bloodshed that defined them both. In the darkness, she pressed a trembling hand over her racing heart and found no easy answers. The next morning dawned gray and somber, clouds gathering overhead as though nature itself mourned the losses both packs had suffered. Marisol woke early, plagued by restless dreams of amber eyes and silent accusations. She rose from bed, running a hand through her tangled hair, determined to regain control of her emotions. The corridors were hushed, the usual bustle muted by the knowledge that two Nightfang warriors would never return. Funerals were scheduled for later in the day, a ceremony for the fallen that demanded the presence of the entire pack. Marisol's eyes stung with guilt, for she knew that if she had been fully focused, perhaps she could have prevented one of those deaths. Her confusion over that shocking bond had cost precious seconds. No one had openly questioned her competence, but she felt the self-condemnation gnaw at her. She donned a simple outfit, black pants and a dark tunic, then made her way to the training grounds in the hopes that physical exertion would quiet her thoughts. The wide courtyard was ringed by a low stone wall, the floor packed hard by countless hours of sparring. Weapon racks stood on either side, holding swords, spears, knives, and archery equipment. At this early hour, only a few wolves were present, stretching or running drills. She recognized Titus, one of the more seasoned warriors, practicing with a pair of daggers. He paused, nodding a silent greeting as she approached. She gave a curt nod in return, selecting a long staff from the rack. Picturing the fight from the previous night, she launched herself into a flurry of moves, spinning the staff around her body with precise skill. Each strike whipped through the air, accompanied by the rhythmic thud of the staff connecting with the wooden training dummy. It felt good to channel her pent-up turmoil into combat form, as if she could exercise all her doubts with each blow. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her breath coming faster, but her mind continued to flit back to that moment in the meadow, to the shock of discovering that the man she was meant to kill was also the one fate had chosen to bind to her. Titus cleared his throat, drawing her attention. "You seem tense. You didn't usually train this intensely before sunrise," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. She pulled back, holding the staff at her side. "I have a lot on my mind," she replied, glancing away. He tilted his head in concern. "We lost good wolves last night. Might have lost more if you hadn't intervened." "You did well, Marisol." She studied the ground. She did not feel she had done well. She felt torn. Yet she could not tell Titus the true reason for her distress. "Thank you," she said softly. "We did what we could, but I just want to be sure we're ready for whatever might come next." "I understand. Look, the funerals later today will be hard for everyone. Perhaps after that, we can focus on preparing for the next battle. Gideon may have new orders. I suggest you try to get some rest, if only so you don't exhaust yourself." Titus spoke kindly, but with an edge of concern that made Marisol bristle. She was capable of making her own decisions. She forced a small smile. "I appreciate the worry, but I need to keep training. It's the only way I know how to clear my head." With that, she resumed her practice, shutting out everything beyond the routine of striking and dodging, weaving the staff in controlled arcs. If only her heart could be as unwavering as her technique, she might have been able to forget the tumultuous realization that weighed on her soul. The funeral ceremony took place at midday. The Nightfang wolves gathered in the open courtyard near the large cedar tree that symbolized the heart of their territory. The air was charged with grief as mourners, young and old, paid their respects. A hush fell over the assembly when Alpha Gideon spoke, praising the bravery of those who had died. Candles were placed around two carved wooden pyres, the traditional final rite for warriors who fell in defense of their pack. The flickering light cast shadows across solemn faces. Marisol stood near her father, her posture stiff with sadness. She listened to the eulogies and let the quiet sobs of loved ones wash over her. A part of her was lost in guilt, wishing she could have changed last night's outcome. No tears escaped her eyes. She had been taught to keep her grief locked away, to transform it into resolve. When the pyres were lit and the flames leapt high, she bowed her head, silently swearing she would do more to protect her people. If that meant destroying the blood moon heir, no matter how her wolf felt, so be it. She tried to reaffirm that vow, but her chest tightened with uncertain dread. After the ceremony, as everyone slowly dispersed, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see her mother's friend, Selena, a formidable warrior who had helped raise Marisol after her mother's passing. Selena's eyes were kind, laced with concern. "You carry a heavy burden," she said softly. "Take care not to let it consume you." Marisol nodded, forcing a flicker of a smile. "I will try." She realized how alone she felt in that moment. She wanted to confide in someone about her predicament, but she knew it was impossible. If she breathed a word of the mate bond, her father's fury would be unimaginable. And her pack would likely consider it a betrayal if she hesitated to kill the Blood Moon heir. No, she had to carry this secret alone. As evening approached, Marisol found herself restless once more. Her father was in private meetings with the higher-ranked wolves, deciding how best to retaliate for the incursion. No doubt they were discussing how to bait the Blood Moon heir into another confrontation. She slipped away from the dens, seeking solitude in one of the old watchtowers perched on the southern cliff. Climbing a spiral stone staircase, she reached the top, where a circular platform offered a panoramic view of Nightfang territory. The chill air caught her breath, but she welcomed the briskness. It seemed to clear her thoughts momentarily. She gazed out over the darkening landscape, her eyes tracing the border with Blood Moon territory. A question gnawed at her. Was he out there, also thinking about the bond? Did he feel the same turmoil, the same sense of betrayal by the fates that bound them in such a cruel twist? She tried to steel herself against the lingering warmth she felt whenever she remembered his eyes or the low timbre of his voice. She would not allow her heart to weaken. He was an enemy, and if he came back, she would end him. That was her role. She gripped the stone parapet, her knuckles white. Night wore on, and she remained, letting the moon rise high over her watchful vigil. Eventually, her limbs grew numb from the cold, and she trudged back down the tower steps. She passed guards on the perimeter, exchanging quiet nods. Once in her chamber, she lit a single lantern on a small table by the bed. The fluttering flame cast dancing shadows across the stone walls. Sinking onto the mattress, she stared at the flicker, her mind inevitably drifting to thoughts of him. The bond. The mate bond that should have been the greatest blessing for a wolf, but was now a source of fear. Sleep finally claimed her, heavy and dreamless. But in the early hours of dawn, just before waking, she caught hazy glimpses of a tall figure in a moonlit clearing, of amber eyes filled with sorrow and longing. She bolted upright, sweat beading her brow, her breath ragged. Could these be random nightmares? Or was it some strange connection to the man she was destined both to hate and to desire? Desperate for a distraction, she joined a morning patrol. The group consisted of 4 Nightfang wolves who combed the southwestern boundary again, searching for fresh signs of intrusion. The tension among them was palpable, each warrior on edge after the recent attack. Nonetheless, the hours passed without a single trace of Blood Moon activity. Marisol forced herself to keep watch, though her thoughts repeatedly drifted, scanning the forest shadows for that solitary figure. Returning to Nightfang territory, they encountered a messenger from her father. The beta, a gruff older wolf named Orin, instructed her to join an expedition leaving for the mountainous region beyond the southwestern hills. "We suspect the Blood Moon Pack might be building a new outpost there," Orin explained. "Take a party of 6. Scout the area and report back. If you find hostiles, do not engage unless you have no other choice. Alpha Gideon doesn't want more casualties." Marisol nodded, carefully hiding her unease. She quickly handpicked 5 capable warriors, including Titus for his experience and Selena for her keen senses. After gathering supplies, they set out on the mission. The journey would take the rest of the day if they moved swiftly, possibly requiring them to stay overnight. They slipped past the meadow where the previous battle had occurred, traveling further until the terrain grew rocky and steep. The group moved in near silence, each member alert and ready for any sign of the enemy. Twilight settled by the time they reached the mountain foothills. Thick stands of pine and spruce clung to the rocky slopes, where winding paths offered limited visibility. Marisol led them along an old hunting trail, relying on Titus and Selena to maintain vigilance behind her. The sky darkened, and they lit a few torches to aid their vision. An uneasy breeze whispered among the pines, adding an undercurrent of suspense to every step. They set up a small campsite in a sheltered hollow near a narrow ravine, rotating a watch schedule to ensure constant surveillance. Marisol took the second shift, which began a few hours before midnight. As others dozed around the faint embers of a dying fire, she perched on a flat rock, scanning the night for any sign of movement. The mountainous air was cold, and she tucked her cloak tighter around her shoulders. The loneliness of the hour pressed in, and her thoughts inevitably drifted toward the same question: could he be somewhere nearby? A snap of a branch made her jerk to full alertness. She rose, peering into the thick darkness. A faint rustle came from beyond the circle of trees to the east. She signaled for silence, and with her senses on high alert, she moved quietly away from the campsite, following the sound. Each step was deliberate, measured to avoid making noise. Her wolf instincts flared, urging caution. The small hairs on the back of her neck prickled. After a short distance, she paused behind a cluster of trees. Her ears picked up the sound of steady breathing, a presence just out of sight. She carefully sidled around the trunk, her pulse thundering, and caught a glimpse of a figure standing in a small clearing. The faint moonlight slipped between branches, revealing broad shoulders and a head of dark hair. That tang of kine in the air confirmed her suspicions before she even caught sight of those amber eyes. He stood there, apparently alone, watching her approach with a quiet intensity. His posture was guarded, yet he made no move to retreat. It struck her that this was not the behavior of a spy or a scout attempting to infiltrate it. Seemed more like he had come specifically to find her. Her heart twisted in a confusing mixture of anticipation and dread. She should call for backup, but instead she found herself stepping forward, as though drawn by a magnet. He spoke in a low voice that carried easily through the hush of the forest. "You're patrolling outside your territory," he noted, though there was no accusation in his tone. Marisol hesitated, torn between the urge to attack and the unexplainable bond urging her to hear him out. "You have no business here," she said guardedly, trying to keep her voice cold. He exhaled slowly, sounding almost resigned. "Perhaps not, but I couldn't stay away. I had to see if what I felt that night was real." She clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms. "You should not be here," she repeated, her heart pounding. "We're enemies, and if my people find you, they'll kill you." A wry smile curved across his lips. "Is that what you want?" Marisol ground her teeth, tears threatening to burn her eyes from the sheer frustration of the situation. She had lost friends to the Blood Moon pack. She had been raised to detest everything he represented. Yet her wolf was roaring inside her, urging her to close the distance, to claim the bond fate had decreed. It made her want to scream from the contradiction. "For the sake of my pack, I should kill you," she whispered, voice quavering. "But that bond—" She choked on the words, loathing the way her chest constricted. The bond was unmistakable, forging a powerful connection that unraveled her defenses. She could see his wolf shining in his eyes, an equally powerful longing. She fought to subdue the trembling that spread through her limbs. "Why are you doing this? Why seek me out?" He inhaled as if trying to gather courage. "If you believe me a liar, so be it. But I can't deny the mate bond. It calls to me, just like it calls to you. I don't know how to reconcile this with our family's hatred, but the bond exists, whether we want, but acknowledge it or not." Her throat felt painfully tight. She knew from stories that the mate bond was not something that could be lightly severed. It threaded through a wolf's soul, compelling them toward unity. Yet she had never heard of a bond linking two wolves from warring packs. She forced herself to look at him through the lens of reason. He was tall, his build powerful, yet agile. Shadowy stubble lined his jaw, giving him a rugged edge. But in his eyes, there was a mixture of sorrow and hope that she hadn't expected. Something hardened within her. "I have a duty to my people," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. "If they find out about this bond, it would tear the pack apart. Our war is too deep-rooted. Your father has butchered my kin. My father has done the same to yours. This is an endless cycle." He lifted a hand as though to reach for her, but stopped himself. Frustration etched in his features. "I know," he murmured. "But maybe this bond is a sign that the cycle can end. I've wondered what if we're meant to be the ones who finally bring peace. That's the only explanation I can find for fate to connect us." "Peace?" she echoed bitterly. The notion was so foreign it almost felt like a cruel joke. "Our packs do not want peace. They want vengeance. They want blood. I can't see how a single bond could erase so many generations of hatred." She swallowed, the memory of the funeral flames still fresh in her mind. "And after last night, I lost friends. Do you realize how impossible your idea sounds?" His gaze flickered with grief. "We lost wolves, too. My cousin was one of them." He cast his eyes downward, as though reliving a painful memory. "I didn't know them well, but I share the blame. We're all caught in this. I hate it. But you and maybe we have a choice?" Marisol stared at him, her emotions warring. She had expected the Blood Moon heir to be cruel, arrogant, a carbon copy of his father. Instead, he seemed burdened by the same devastation, the same guilt. It softened the edges of her rage. She wanted to reject him outright, to brand him a liar, but her instincts told her otherwise. Despite everything, she sensed sincerity. The air between them felt charged, and she found herself stepping closer without thinking. The bond throbbed, stirring an insane craving to touch him, to feel the warmth of his skin. She had never been so disoriented by her own body, torn between yearning and revulsion at the idea of wanting an enemy. The moment felt poised on a knife's edge, the outcome uncertain. Suddenly, a shout echoed from the campsite behind her, the voice of one of her sentries calling her name in alarm. She realized she had ventured dangerously far. Her team must have noticed her absence. Panic bolted through her system. If they discovered her talking with the Blood Moon heir, the ramifications would be dire. She whirled around, heart pounding. He gave a single nod, understanding. "I'll go," he said softly, stepping back into the shadows. "But I'll return. This bond can't be ignored forever." Marisol opened her mouth, wanting to say something that might break the tension, but no words came out. She simply watched as he melted into the darkness, swift and silent. A second call from the campsite cut through her stunned state, and she sprinted back, trying to quell her racing heart. Titus was waiting, concern etched across his face. "What happened? I heard you move off. Is there trouble?" She shook her head, carefully avoiding his eyes. "I thought I saw movement, but it was just a deer," she lied smoothly, or as smoothly as she could manage. "I chased it off. No threat." He relaxed somewhat, though a trace of suspicion lingered. "We have to stay alert. Let's go back to the others." She nodded and let him lead the way. All the while, she felt as though her pulse might give her away, thrumming so loudly in her ears. She ached with conflicting emotions, frustration, and a flicker of forbidden hope. How could she stand at the threshold of what should have been a beautiful destiny, only to find it shackled by a war that had defined her entire life? Morning arrived, and the group resumed their search of the foothills without finding any sign of a hidden Blood Moon outpost. Although the tension remained, no confrontation took place. By late afternoon, they decided to head back home, mindful that Gideon would want a full report. Marisol felt a sense of relief, but also an inexplicable pang of longing she couldn't suppress. The bond was not something that could be willed away. She could sense it faintly, like a faint heartbeat that pulsed in time with her own, calling for the one who belonged to her on a fundamental level. They arrived at the Night Fang fortress under a sky thick with storm clouds, a biting wind heralding the first droplets of rain. Marisol parted ways with her warriors, each heading to their quarters for rest. She was summoned to a war council meeting almost immediately, where her father and a handful of senior leaders discussed the next steps. Maps were spread out, drawn with fresh ink showing the southwestern mountain routes. Alpha Gideon glanced at Marisol. "Report," he said simply. She cleared her throat. "We found no evidence of a Blood Moon encampment in the mountains. We scouted for miles but saw nothing beyond the usual wildlife. They may have decided not to occupy that region. Or, perhaps, they're hidden further west. However, we did not detect any strong scent markers. It's likely their presence there is minimal, if it exists at all." A murmur rippled through the room, some relief but mostly continued suspicion. Gideon rubbed his chin. They could be waiting for a better opportunity, or focusing their efforts on a different front. For all we know, they're expanding in secret. We'll continue to watch. He paused, gazing at Marisol intently. "We need to talk later, just the two of us." Her heart skipped a beat. "Of course, Father," she replied evenly, hoping her face revealed nothing of the turmoil beneath. Was he suspicious? Had someone spotted her meeting with the Blood Moon heir? She forced herself to remain composed as the discussion continued about patrol schedules and the need for more alliances with smaller neighboring packs. Gideon was determined to maintain Night Fang's superiority. When the meeting concluded, he gestured for Marisol to follow him into a private chamber adjacent to the main hall. This smaller room contained only a sturdy table, a few chairs, and a single candle flickering with a dull glow. She stood before him, hands clasped behind her back, waiting for him to speak. His gray eyes, so much like hers, studied her in silence. Eventually, he spoke, his voice a quiet rumble. "You were on the battlefield that night, face to face with the Blood Moon Alpha's son. Everyone knows he escaped. Some even whisper that you had a chance to kill him and you hesitated. Explain. Her stomach flipped, but she kept her features neutral. I was in the thick of the fight. We lost track of him for a moment. By the time I realized where he was, others were already attacking him. He fled before I could land a killing blow. The words felt hollow, but she tried to inject enough conviction to sound believable. Gideon's lips thinned. He crossed his arms over his chest. I saw your skill. I know what you're capable of. I also know that fate can be unpredictable. Did he overpower you? Marisol hesitated, recalling the brief tussle and how he had grabbed her wrist. He's strong. I won't lie about that, she finally replied. But I believe I could defeat him if I get another chance. The chaos of the battle made it difficult. Our lines were scattered. The Alpha studied her, searching her eyes for any sign of deception. She forced herself to maintain a calm, collected stance. Finally, Gideon nodded slowly. You must not fail the next time, he said in a steely voice. In you, I see our greatest hope of finishing this war. The day you kill that heir is the day our pack can take vengeance for everything the Blood Moon Pack has done. A weight settled over her. She clenched her jaw and gave a single nod. I won't fail, she promised, though her heart twisted at the words. Gideon's demeanor softened slightly. He reached out, resting a hand on her shoulder. I wish there was another way, but the feud has dragged on for too many generations. Our ancestors demanded blood for blood, and so do we. He paused, a flicker of paternal concern crossing his features. You're strong, Marisol, just like your mother. She wanted you to have a future free from fear and hatred. Perhaps ending this once and for all is how that future begins. She forced herself to swallow past a sudden lump in her throat. Did she really believe that killing him would be the path to freedom, or would it only continue the cycle? She fought to keep her expression stern, nodding again. I understand. I won't let the pack down. After that somber exchange, Marisol retreated to her room, the Alpha's words echoing in her mind. She wanted to scream into the emptiness. Everything in her life demanded she kill him, yet the bond demanded she do the opposite. She pulled off her boots and sat on the edge of her bed, leaning forward with her head in her hands. She couldn't keep lying indefinitely, especially if the Blood Moon heir planned to approach her again. The mere thought of it made her heart quicken with both dread and longing. He had spoken of the possibility of peace, as though their bond could be the key. She had never imagined such a path, but perhaps it was a chance to break the cycle. What would that even look like? Could she betray her father's deepest desire? If she allied herself with the man she was supposed to kill, would her pack ever forgive her? And if she didn't, could she really live with the weight of murdering her mate? The questions whirled in her mind, offering no clear answers. Days passed without any word or sighting of Blood Moon wolves. Marisol tried to keep busy, sparring, assisting with pack duties, and continuing to lead patrols. She was jumpy, half expecting that he might appear out of the shadows at any moment. She also feared that some watchful eye might discover her turmoil and expose her secret. Each night, she wrestled with her conscience until she fell into an exhausted sleep, dreaming of complicated roads and a figure she both yearned for and dreaded. A week after the skirmish, Gideon announced a plan to send an envoy into neutral territory, a small settlement of independent wolf families who sometimes traded with both Night Fang and Blood Moon. the Alpha believed that forging closer ties might provide extra resources and perhaps intelligence on blood moon movements. Because Marisol was viewed as an extension of Gideon's authority and a respected warrior, she was chosen to lead the envoy. The trip would take several days, but it promised to be relatively safe. No one expected a blood moon ambush so close to neutral lands. Early one morning, Marisol set out with her small party. They traveled by horseback, taking a well-worn path through rolling hills and sparse forests. She tried to keep her focus on the mission, reminding herself that this was an opportunity to expand alliances and gather useful information. But her thoughts strayed continually to him. Were there rumors about Blood Moon's next move? Would she find any hint that he was near? The longing she felt was as relentless as it was bewildering. They arrived at the neutral settlement by midday on the second day, greeted by cautious locals who maintained polite relations with both packs but stayed out of direct conflict. The settlement itself was modest, a scattering of small wooden houses, a marketplace, and a communal hall. Marisol and her envoy dismounted, tethering their horses outside the hall as the local representatives welcomed them. She introduced herself as the Night Fang Alpha's daughter, emphasizing their desire for fair trade. The discussions were pleasant enough. They bartered for a few goods, including dried meats, medicinal herbs, and a precious stash of silver that could be crafted into arrowheads. Once formalities were concluded, they were offered lodging in one of the larger cabins near the settlement's edge. The place felt almost too peaceful, devoid of the tension that plagued Nightfang territory. As dusk fell, she found herself wandering near the settlement's outskirts, drawn by a desire for fresh air and a quiet moment. A cool breeze stirred the grass, and the moon peeked from behind drifting clouds. She sensed him before she saw him. That familiar spike of awareness prickled across her skin, setting her heart racing. Her wolf came alive inside her, urging her to go to him. In the dim glow, she saw his silhouette, standing beside a tree on a small rise just beyond the settlement boundary. This time, she hesitated only for a moment before moving toward him, helpless to resist the pull. When she drew near, she saw relief in his eyes, as if he had wondered whether she would show up at all. "You're far from home," he observed quietly, scanning the settlement lights behind her. She hugged herself defensively. "You are too," she answered, feeling her pulse hammer. "If anyone sees you—" Her voice trailed off, laden with the unspoken danger. His expression was serious. "I heard Nightfang was sending an envoy here, so I took a risk. I couldn't be sure you would come alone. I just hoped that if you did, I might find you." He glanced at the ground, as though struggling with the weight of his words. "I had to see you, again." She closed her eyes for a moment, grappling with the swirl of emotions. "What are we doing?" she whispered. "This is insane. Our packs are on the brink of war, and yet here we are, sneaking around like we're star-crossed fools." He stepped closer, carefully, as though wary of scaring her off. "We might be fools," he acknowledged softly. "But is it wrong to want to find a better way? We don't have to become our fathers. Maybe fate chose us for a reason." She tensed, his nearness stirring that magnetic bond. She could feel his warmth, sense the steady thud of his heartbeat. Against every instinct for self-preservation, she didn't back away. She could only stare at him, her wolf nearly purring with contentment at being in such close proximity. But the memories of slaughter and revenge were etched deeply, fueling her conflicting desires. With a trembling breath she spoke. "Even if we want that, how? My father expects me to kill you. Your father likely expects the same. Our packs can't coexist without bloodshed. That's all they know." He nodded grimly, then gently lifted a hand to brush a strand of hair from her cheek, a delicate touch that sent a thrill racing through her veins. She froze, torn between letting herself lean into that simple contact and jerking away to maintain her pride. Finally, she allowed him to tuck the hair behind her ear, her heart pounding in time with a drumbeat only the two of them could hear. "Then we change the script," he said quietly. "We could hide for a time, learn about each other, see if there's a path forward. If the feud is truly unsalvageable, then we'll decide what to do about the bond." "Decide what to do?" she echoed, confusion tinging her voice. She understood that severing a fated mate bond was nearly impossible without dire consequences. Some said it led to madness. Others said it required one partner's death. The very idea turned her stomach. He pressed his lips together. "I don't want to lose you," he admitted, voice raw. "Even if we barely know each other, this bond runs deeper than logic. I'm aware it sounds ridiculous, but I can't deny it. At the same time, I know we're both bound by our families." A swirl of conflicting thoughts churned inside her. She had been raised to see him as a monster, yet right now he was looking at her with such honesty that it rattled every belief she had. She didn't want to think about the heartbreak and ruin they might face if this bond continued to draw them together. "What about your father?" she asked, her tone tinged with cynicism. "He's the reason my pack wants your blood. Do you honestly think he'll let his only heir pursue peace?" His jaw tightened. "My father is a hard man, shaped by loss and the traditions of our ancestors. I don't know if he's capable of letting go of that hatred, but I have to try. Whether he approves or not, I can't ignore this bond, and I can't keep killing your people." She looked at him sharply, remembering the funeral pyres and the howling grief in her pack's courtyard. "How many more must die before we even figure out if peace is possible?" she asked, tears burning her eyes. He raised a hand as though to console her, then let it drop, uncertain. "I don't want another pointless battle," he said. "But I'm only one voice in Blood Moon. If your father attacks, my pack will defend itself. And if your father attacks, we'll do the same," she replied, voice trembling. A heavy silence settled between them, haunted by the knowledge that they stood on opposite ends of a deep chasm. The mate bond was like a slender thread that bridged that rift, but it was tenuous, dangerously close to snapping under the weight of blood-stained legacy. She stepped back, the abrupt loss of warmth making her wolf whine in protest. "This is madness," she said again, her composure fraying. "I can't be found like this, speaking to you as if we're allies." She ran a shaky hand through her hair, heartsick at the realization that part of her wanted to stay. He inclined his head in a silent nod. "I'll wait," he said quietly. "If you decide you can't do this, if your loyalty to your pack is stronger, I'll respect that. But if you find even a sliver of hope that we can do something different, I'll be here." She swallowed the lump in her throat, backing away another step. She watched him linger in the shadows, unwilling or unable to leave until she did. Finally, she turned and made her way back toward the settlement lights, chest tight with turmoil. Every step felt like an internal battle, the bond tugging at her to return. But she forced herself onward, repeating in her mind the duty that bound her to her father and her pack. In the days that followed, she completed her envoy mission, sealing a few small trade agreements. Yet her mind was distant, replaying that final conversation. He was willing to chance everything on the faint possibility of a better future. She, on the other hand, was so deeply entrenched in her obligations that she couldn't see a clear path. She returned to Nightfang territory with her group, carefully avoiding details about her private rendezvous in the neutral settlement. She doubted anyone suspected she had encountered him. But every time her father praised her dedication, a pang of guilt shot through her. She was leading a double life in her own mind, torn between her vow to kill the Blood Moon heir and her growing inability to imagine driving a blade through his heart. Late one evening, as she prepared for bed, an unsettling thought came to her. War might break out regardless of what she did. If so, the day might come when she and her mate faced each other in the midst of fire and carnage, forced to make a choice that would shatter one of their worlds. She shivered, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. Her wolf stirred in agitation. No matter how much she tried to bury it, the bond flared stronger each time they met, tying their fates together in a way she had never believed possible. She whispered into the lonely darkness of her chamber, "What am I supposed to do?" Her voice trembled with a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to feel. The words echoed off the walls, fading into silence. No answer came, only the way to the destiny that had yet to be decided. Nightfang territory settled into a tense rhythm in the following days, underpinned by relentless caution and ever-present wariness. The clash that had cost wolves on both sides, coupled with the long-standing hostilities, hung in the air like a thundercloud waiting to unleash a raging storm. Within the warren of caves and stone corridors, Alpha Gideon's preparations continued. Patrols were doubled, supply caches were inspected, and strategic gatherings convened behind closed doors. Across the territory, the wolves felt the tremor of impending conflict. Some whispered that Blood Moon was planning a siege, while others believed Nightfang would strike first in an effort to gain the advantage. Every rumor ignited fresh sparks of fear and anger. Unseen beneath the steady hum of dread, Marisol fought her own battle in silence. In the week since her mission to the neutral settlement, her mind had spun ceaselessly over the choices that seemed to narrow with each passing day. Night after night, she woke in a sweat, haunted by her father's command to bring down the Blood Moon Alpha's son, and equally tormented by the bond that grew stronger within her heart. If she had refused every chance to meet him again, perhaps that bond would have gradually faded, or at least might have been suppressed by time and discipline. But fate seemed bent on pushing them closer to a reckoning. Her father's watchful gaze trailed her often, though he never openly questioned her loyalty. Whenever she saw the lines of strain etched into his features, she found herself weighed down by guilt. He had shaped her life around a single goal, and she had sworn to fulfill it, to rip the final heir from the Blood Moon bloodline. The unspoken question, would she betray that mission for the sake of an unthinkable bond, haunted her each time she looked into Gideon's stern gray eyes. Despite the tension, routine tasks could not be neglected. The pack's younger wolves needed training, border checks had to be done, and the fortress required constant upkeep. Marisol threw herself into these obligations, hoping to suppress her inner turmoil. Each morning, she rose before dawn, sparring for hours, pushing her body until her muscles quivered with exhaustion. She accepted any scouting duty, covering wide stretches of territory. She seldom spoke beyond what was strictly necessary, and at night she quietly returned to her room, ignoring the suspicious glances exchanged by her peers. Even Selena and Titus, two who cared for her deeply, sensed the changes in her. But neither had the courage to confront her directly, and she offered no invitations to discuss her emotions. Everything in Nightfang braced for a turning point, an inciting event that would determine the next phase of the war. It arrived in the form of a Blood Moon incursion on the southwestern border, though no one saw the enemy wolves. Instead, the Nightfang patrol discovered a sight of devastation that left them stunned and enraged. A small settlement of allied families, loyal to Nightfang, had been ransacked. Doors torn from hinges, livestock slaughtered, furniture reduced to shards. Charcoal smudges on the walls suggested an attempt to burn the dwellings. Fortunately, the residents had fled in time, but the destruction was unmistakable. Though no sign was left behind indicating responsibility, the location bore traces of foreign wolf scents. When word reached the fortress, no one doubted Blood Moon was to blame, especially Gideon. The incident outraged him, and his wrath rippled through the pack like a shockwave. In a matter of hours, the atmosphere that had been so taut before hardened into calls for immediate vengeance. Warriors gathered in the central courtyard, volunteering for retaliation. At an urgent war council, Gideon addressed his people with grim resolve, citing the razed settlement as final proof of Blood Moon's savagery. He demanded swift retribution, a show of force that would demonstrate Nightfang's unwillingness to let such crimes go unanswered. Marisol stood on the edge of the crowd, heart pounding as Gideon's powerful voice echoed through the hall. She felt the rush of pack unity roiling around her, vengeance, hatred, conviction. All the old resentments flared again, fueling the certainty that war was inevitable. Later that day, when the council met in private, Gideon declared his intention to mount a large-scale strike on Blood Moon territory. The plan was to gather a contingent of elite warriors and assault the enemy from the southwestern forests, the same region where the atrocity had occurred. The devastation inflicted on the allied families demanded an equally destructive retaliation. Gideon seemed almost feverish with fury, as though possessed by an insatiable desire to break the Blood Moon pack once and for all. Marisol was summoned to the council chamber shortly thereafter. She found her father leaning over a table strewn with fresh maps, each marking the known passes into Blood Moon land and the suspected location of their main stronghold. With him stood Beta Orin, the stoic Titus, and a handful of older warriors who ranked high in Nightfang's hierarchy. Marisol saluted her father with a clenched fist over her heart, determined to keep her inner conflict buried. Gideon's gaze carried the weight of a father's fierce ambitions. "We've decided to strike hard in the southwestern region. Once we force them into retreat, we'll advance deeper, perhaps as far as their fortress if the advantage holds. This time, we finish what our ancestors started." Marisol steeled herself. "I will lead the vanguard if that's what you ask, father." He gave a brisk nod, though his tone softened for just a heartbeat. "Yes, but be cautious. Our scouts report they've bolstered their numbers there. You'll have Titus, Selena, and a full squad at your command. I'll move with the secondary group behind you. Once you break their lines, we'll push Gret forward." She swallowed hard and bowed her head. "I understand. They won't escape this time," he growled. "We'll hunt down even their Alpha's heir. He's the key to their continued defiance. Remove him, and Blood Moon will crumble." Marisol's insides nodded at the mention of the heir. He had a name, she had learned it in a whispered conversation during their last furtive meeting, Ryland. Just the recollection of it made her heart twist. He was not merely an heir, not only the face of an enemy, but a man whose laughter, sorrow, and fierce determination she had glimpsed. She forced the memory aside before it could paralyze her resolve. "Yes," she managed, her tone as neutral as she could make it. "We'll be ready." Gideon's eyes gleamed, and he turned back to the maps, his voice harsh with finality. "We move at dawn in 2 days. Prepare yourselves." Marisol left the chamber feeling like she was walking a precarious tightrope. She had just sworn to lead a strike meant to destroy Ryland's people, and, by extension, Ryland himself. That unrelenting question slammed back into her. Would she truly strike him down when faced with the chance, or would she yield to the bond that threatened everything she knew? 2 days passed in a rush of preparations and sleepless nights. Supply lines were organized for the warriors, armor was inspected, weapons sharpened. The fortress hummed with urgency. Marisol oversaw her squad, ensuring they had enough silver-tipped arrows, short swords, daggers, and bandages in case the clash turned bloody. Every anxious breath seemed to carry an unspoken acknowledgement that not everyone would return. Tension carved lines into once confident faces. And still, through it all, Marisol's turmoil loomed, simmering quietly. She couldn't speak her truth to anyone, at least, not without risking condemnation as a traitor. She moved through the motions of an honorable warrior, fueling herself with the memories of the destruction the Blood Moon Pack had caused. On the morning of the strike, the sky was a leaden curtain, gray and heavy, as though it might burst into rain at any moment. Over 100 Nightfang wolves assembled in the courtyard, grouped into organized units. Many had already shifted to their wolf forms, pacing restlessly, waiting for the signal to depart. Gideon appeared at the top of the grand stone steps, his posture rigid and commanding. He offered a short, ringing speech on pride, vengeance, and the unstoppable might of Nightfang. His words stirred the wolves into howls of affirmation. Then, with a sharp hand gesture, he set them marching into the gloom of dawn. Marisol led the vanguard, flanked by Selena and Titus, each in partial armor designed to give them agility in both human and wolf forms. The southwestern approach forced them through a thick region of forest that eventually dropped into a winding valley closer to Blood Moon Land. The sound of clinking weapons, shifting leather, and padded footfalls drifted on the cold breeze. Although the morning sky brightened slightly, the sun never quite broke through the oppressive clouds. The group moved in disciplined silence. Marisol's senses were on high alert, scanning every rustle of leaves, every subtle shift of the wind. She expected a Blood Moon scouting party to intercept them, but the journey passed without interruption. Tension buzzed at the base of her skull. Surely the Blood Moon Pack knew they were coming. They would not wait idle. The memory of Ryland's promise, the vow that he wanted to end the bloodshed, tormented her. This offensive contradicted every hope of peace, yet she could find no alternative. By midday, they emerged on the far edge of the forest, where the land sloped downward into rolling fields and rocky outcrops. According to Gideon's intelligence, the Blood Moon Pack maintained a large outpost near the foot of these slopes, guarding the route to their main stronghold. The plan was to storm that outpost, secure the area, and open the path for the main Nightfang force. With careful gestures, Marisol signaled her warriors to spread out in a semicircle formation. In the distance, she spied movement, shadows darting among scattered boulders. Blood Moon wolves, waiting to defend their territory. Adrenaline surged through her. She waved for Selena to take archers to the left flank, while Titus led a small group through the tall grass on the right. Marisol remained at the center, forging a direct path toward the cluster of worn stone buildings partially hidden in a shallow dip of land. As they advanced, she picked up faint scents of Blood Moon wolves. They were close, the space between enemies measured in heartbeats. A sharp cry sounded from somewhere up ahead. Blood Moon defenders rose from behind a row of rocks, launching a volley of arrows. Nightfang archers answered in kind, silver-tipped shafts cutting through the cold air. Some wolves shifted under the cover of grass, bounding forward with snarls and teeth bared. The battle erupted in an instant, the land filled with the clash of steel, the howls of wolves, and the desperate scramble for dominance. Marisol dove behind a boulder as arrows hissed overhead. She shifted her stance, scanned the battlefield, and motioned for her squad to push forward. The wind whipped at her hair, carrying the metallic tang of fear and fury. She saw Titus locked in fierce combat with a Blood Moon warrior. Selena was already firing arrow after arrow, each bolt whistling toward its target. The chaos thickened around them. The yells of pain and rage mingled with the pounding of her heart. She swept forward, leading a charge to break the blood moon line. A silver-tipped spear in her hands, she lunged at an enemy wolf who shifted too slowly to dodge. The blow wounded him in the shoulder, forcing him to retreat. Another rushed at her, and she swung her spear shaft upward, knocking him to the ground. She felt no triumph, only the suffocating knowledge that each strike might seal her place in a war she no longer believed in. Blood Moon reinforcements surged from the outpost. Their vantage point on the slope provided them an advantage, raining down arrows and slingshot stones at the Nightfang intruders. Not to be outdone, a group of Nightfang archers positioned themselves on higher ground to the north, returning fire. The pitched battle raged in a swirl of dust, yells, and the sharp sting of silver. Through it all, Marisol's mind raced with a single, haunting question. Where was Ryland? She forced the thought aside when a towering Blood Moon warrior leapt at her from a rock. He crashed into her, forcing her to the ground. She barely twisted in time to keep his blade from gouging her throat. With a snarl, she slammed the butt of her spear upward. It caught him in the jaw, sending him staggering. A swift punch followed, and he collapsed onto the rocky slope, stunned. She stumbled to her feet, ignoring the pain radiating along her ribs. A short distance away, Selena loosed arrows with unwavering precision. Titus wrestled a foe in wolf form, fangs and claws scraping for purchase. Nightfang forces seemed to gain ground as they pressed toward the outpost's half-broken walls. Screams and snarls cut through the air, each moment thick with the risk of death. Across the battlefield, she saw faces contorted in fury or fear, all part of the same violent mosaic. Suddenly, a wave of Blood Moon wolves came in from the flank, forcing back a section of Nightfang fighters. One Nightfang warrior was dragged down by two enormous wolves. Marisol felt a pang of horror, hearing his strangled cry. She whirled to signal support when something in the periphery of her vision froze her in place. A familiar figure sprinting across the chaos. Dark hair, broad shoulders, armed with a curved blade. Ryland. Her breath caught. He moved like a phantom amid the confusion, shoving aside an injured comrade to safety, then turning to face a knot of attacking Nightfang wolves. Her heart hammered. She had dreaded and longed for this moment. Yet here he was, her father's mortal enemy, her fated mate, fighting for the survival of his pack. One of her warriors advanced on Ryland with a raised sword. Another circled behind him, determined to catch him off guard. Marisol's eyes darted between them, her instincts flaring protectively even though her mind screamed that she should stay out of this. She saw Ryland parry the first blow, only to realize too late that a second attacker had circled behind him. Terror gripped her. If that second blow landed, it might end him. And no matter how twisted her situation, she couldn't bear the thought of watching him die. She hurled herself forward, bridging the distance in a flurry of motion. Throwing her weight into the second attacker, she knocked him off balance before he could strike. The Nightfang wolf stumbled, confused, and growled at her. "What are you doing, Marisol? He's the heir. End him." Her heart thundered. "I'll handle him," she spat back, hoping the fierce snap in her voice would disguise her inner dread. Ryland's gaze locked onto hers, a flash of stunned recognition stirring in his amber eyes. In that moment, the battlefield noise seemed to recede, as if some invisible bubble briefly sheltered them from the chaos. Blood dripped from a shallow cut on his cheek. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, the primal pulse of the mate bond throbbing between them. She felt the undeniable surge of her wolf's longing and forced herself to remain outwardly grim. The Nightfang warrior she'd tackled lunged again, intent on seizing the kill. Marisol blocked his path with her spear. "I said I'll handle him," she snarled through clenched teeth. If she let her comrade keep attacking, she might lose Ryland forever. The raw intensity of that thought blindsided her. "Fine," the other wolf barked, frustration burning in his eyes. "Finish it. Don't hesitate this time." Then he spun away to rejoin a different fray, presumably trusting Marisol's lethal skills. Ryland held his blade in a defensive stance, as though wary of her. The bond warred with everything else in her head. She wanted to scream, to tell him to run, to vanish before more Nightfangs converged on him. Her father had declared that Blood Moon's heir must die. Countless voices in her mind shouted that she had to do her duty, and yet she couldn't raise a spear against him. He swallowed hard, struggling to speak over the distant clamor of the fight. "If you don't kill me now," he rasped, "your people will question your loyalty." She shook her head, chest tightening. "I can't let them kill you, either." She felt so torn, it was as if her body was being ripped in two. The mate bond demanded she protect him. Her father's mission demanded she end him. There was no middle ground in a war of this magnitude. An arrow suddenly hissed between them, lodging in a nearby rock. The moment shattered. Marisol grabbed Ryland's wrist, yanking him toward a jagged slope partially hidden by scattered rubble. He didn't resist, too stunned perhaps, or perhaps just as unwilling to let her be harmed. They scrambled away from the thickest fighting, though danger remained on every side. Wolves fought in tight clusters. Some had shifted fully to their wolf forms, tearing into throats. The ground was slick with blood. They reached a narrow recess in the slope, half concealed by boulders. She turned to him, chest heaving. "You have to retreat," she said in a shaken whisper. "Nightfang has more fighters on the way. You'll be overwhelmed." Ryland shook his head, even as conflicting emotions twisted his expression. "I can't leave my pack to fall. My father is here, somewhere, leading the defense. If I vanish, my people will see it as cowardice. So we're trapped," she said through trembling lips. She peered around the rook. Her own warriors were advancing, and it seemed Blood Moon's line was weakening. Gideon's plan was working. The outpost was close to falling. A flicker of desperation contorted Ryland's face. "I don't want more death," he said, eyes reflecting the torment inside him. "But I can't stand by and watch Blood Moon be destroyed. And you can't stand by if Nightfang needs you. Is there no path that ends with both of us alive?" Marisol pressed a shaking hand to her forehead. She thought of the horror visited upon that small settlement, the atrocities that Gideon blamed on Blood Moon. She wondered if Ryland had taken part in that carnage. The man standing before her, his breath ragged with anguish, seemed incapable of senseless destruction. She found it easier to believe some zealot under his father's command might have committed the deed. But her father wanted none of that nuance. All Gideon saw was centuries of hostility and fresh devastation that demanded a swift and lethal reply. A surge of howls erupted from behind them. Nightfang forces had broken through the outpost's outer barricade. The thunder of footsteps reverberated. Victory for Nightfang was close at hand, but it came at the cost of even more blood. She and Ryland exchanged a final, agonized glance. The unspoken truth in that look was clear. Whatever they did next, they would remain on opposite sides of this battle. Both had obligations pulling them apart. Without another word, he tore himself away, sprinting out from the concealment to join a group of Blood Moon warriors desperately trying to hold the line. Gritting her teeth, Marisol forced herself to circle back to her squad. She found Titus wrestling a blood moon wolf to the ground near the half-broken walls of the outpost. Selena directed archers to take higher ground. Marisol joined in, rallying her breathless warriors to press forward. The clash of steel and the snarls of wolves filled the narrow courtyard where Blood Moon defenders had dug in. Night Fang warriors battered the crumbling barricade with iron rods, gradually tearing it apart. The sky seemed darker than before, and a chill wind carried the scent of blood and sweat. At last, with a thunderous crash, a significant portion of the outpost's wall collapsed. Night Fang fighters poured in, overrunning the remaining Blood Moon resistors. Marisol found herself battling side by side with Selena, knocking back those who resisted. Her spear cut a path, while Selena's blade flashed in the dim light. Screams rang out. She heard someone yelling for retreat, and soon the Blood Moon defenders scrambled to escape through a gap on the far side of the outpost. The outpost was in Night Fang hands by nightfall. A great bonfire was lit in the courtyard, burning away the debris. Gideon arrived with the secondary wave of warriors, obviously pleased to find that the outpost had fallen. He strode among the battered survivors and the spoils of victory like a conquering king. Marisol's body ached from countless bruises and shallow cuts, but she watched her father with a carefully blank expression. Part of her reeled with guilt, vividly recalling Ryland's horror-stricken face, yet outwardly she accepted the praise of her peers for leading the successful assault. That evening, the Night Fang forces fortified the captured outpost. Scouts patrolled the perimeter, in case Blood Moon launched a counterattack. Gideon convened a brief war council in the outpost's largest remaining building. Marisol stood at his side, while the battered troops crowded the corridors and courtyard. Much to Gideon's disappointment, the Blood Moon Alpha had apparently escaped, and there was no sign of his heir. The whereabouts of their top leaders remained unknown. Regardless, Gideon declared this conquest a major turning point. With this crucial vantage point in Night Fang hands, Blood Moon territory lay exposed to deeper infiltration. In the privacy of a corner, Gideon turned to Marisol, his expression stern but proud. "You've done well. The outpost is ours, and the Blood Moon Pack will feel this loss deeply. Still, we have not achieved our ultimate goal. The Alpha and his son are out there. If they have any sense, they'll gather what remains of their forces and prepare a counterstrike. But you showed you have the skill to face them head-on." Marisol bowed her head, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I only did what was necessary for Night Fang." A stone of guilt lodged in her chest. She recalled that moment when she'd saved Ryland from her own comrade's blade. That was not necessary by any standard measure, and if Gideon ever learned of it, her loyalty would be irreparably questioned. Gideon laid a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we push forward. We'll send scouts deeper. Let Blood Moon realize we hold the advantage. When we find them, be ready to deliver the final blow, especially if you catch sight of the heir." She managed a short nod. "I understand." Satisfied, Gideon left to tend to other matters, and Marisol stood alone beside the flickering torches. In that moment of quiet, her composure cracked. The stench of death hung heavily in the air. Wounded wolves lined the corners, some whimpering or gasping as medics tried to tend their gashes. This victory was a Pyrrhic one. Night Fang had lost over a dozen wolves, with more gravely injured. The yard bore the corpses of Blood Moon warriors who had fought to the bitter end. Each loss was another strand of tragedy woven into the tapestry of hate that bound these two packs. Her thoughts returned to Ryland. He had survived for now. She prayed he was not wounded beyond help. She despised how powerless she felt, that all she could do was hope. Her father's triumphant words rang in her ears. "When we find them, be ready to deliver the final blow. If no one else killed Ryland first, Gideon expected that honor to belong to her. He saw it as the apex of her destiny. She saw only heartbreak, a looming choice that felt more like a death sentence for her soul. In the dark hush of that captured outpost, she wondered if this war would truly be won by the pack that inflicted the most suffering, or if they would all lose something essential along the way. Sleep came fitfully that night. Curled on a makeshift bedroll within the battered building, she drifted in and out of feverish dreams. Sometimes she saw her mother's face, gentle but determined, urging her to stand strong for Nightfang. Then she would see Ryland, eyes filled with pain, as he was taken by Gideon's blade. She jolted awake more than once, feeling tears burning her eyelids, but forced them down. Warriors could not afford to weep for their enemies. Yet fated mates were more than enemies, an unwanted truth that refused to let her rest. By dawn, a cold drizzle had begun, the sky gray with thick clouds. Nightfang's scouts ventured out to gauge whether Blood Moon planned a counterattack. Rumors circulated that the Blood Moon Alpha had regrouped near the deeper forests, days away. Gideon ordered the vanguard to move again. Occupying the outpost was not enough. He wanted to press into the heart of Blood Moon territory, seeking that elusive final confrontation. The pack's morale swayed between resolute fervor and a dawning sense that these battles might escalate beyond anything they had experienced before. Marisol joined the scouting parties that searched the perimeter for any sign of ambush. 2 miles west of the outpost, amid a low stretch of rocky terrain, she parted ways with Titus to cover more ground. She moved lightly through the drizzle, scanning the horizon for silhouettes. Her thoughts churned with anxieties about Ryland's whereabouts. She told herself that if a confrontation happened again, she would have to decide once and for all. Indecision would get her killed, or him. Is there a world where we can both live? She wondered. Can we do more than cower behind separate lines? A flicker of movement caught her eye, a lone wolf form slinking among the rocks. She tensed, bracing for a fight, but as she got closer, she realized something was off. The wolf was staggering, limping with one forepaw held awkwardly. Its fur was matted with blood. The muddy drizzle made it difficult to identify markings. As she approached, the wolf bared its teeth in a reflex of pain or warning. Her heart clenched. This was not a Nightfang wolf. She recognized the faint tang of Blood Moon scent. A wounded enemy, alone and vulnerable in contested territory. She paused, weapon ready in case it lashed out. But the creature gave a broken whine, collapsing onto the damp ground, chest heaving. She thought of her father's orders, kill any Blood Moon wolf found behind their lines. But the sight triggered a wave of pity she couldn't ignore. This wolf was clearly done fighting. If it remained untreated, it would die from its wounds. In a moment of impulsive compassion, she tucked away her spear and knelt a short distance away. The wolf's eyes, clouded with pain, regarded her warily. "I'm not here to kill you," she said softly, "but I can't let you roam free. If you shift to your human form, I can help bind that wound." The wolf blinked in confusion, then made a low whining sound. Eventually, it complied, shifting into a young man she recognized from the meadow skirmish weeks ago. He was not the same scout captured that night, but she'd glimpsed him in passing on the battlefield. He looked at her with a mixture of terror and hope. Blood seeped from a nasty gash on his torso, and his left arm hung limp. She searched her satchel for bandages. "You were at the outpost, weren't you?" He nodded grimly. We lost," he managed to say through chattering teeth. Rain dripped from his hair and ran in rivulets down his ashen face. "I got separated. Wolves were everywhere. She tore a strip of cloth and pressed it to the wound. "Hold this tight. You'll bleed out otherwise." She wrapped a bandage as best she could under the circumstances. He flinched but tried to help steady himself. "Why are you helping me?" he gasped, staring at her with haunted eyes. "You're the daughter of Alpha Gideon." She didn't answer immediately, busy tightening a knot in the bandage. After a pause, she murmured, "I'm not as cruel as you think." In truth, she didn't know how else to explain her internal battle between hatred and empathy. If Gideon discovered her compassionate deed, he would be furious. She steeled herself, deciding that the fate of this wounded young man was in her hands alone. She could at least try to spare one life in a war that had already claimed so many. Working quickly, she helped him onto a flatter section of ground and tended to his injuries as best she could. He shivered violently, shock setting in. She knew the savage conditions of the battlefield well enough to recognize a grave outcome when she saw one. "Stay still," she said quietly, rummaging for some medicinal herbs. "Once I make sure you won't die, I'll—" A voice cut through the drizzle. "Marisol?" Her head shot up, heart lurching. Titus stood on an outcrop behind her, confusion etched into his expression. She immediately shifted to a more guarded posture. The wounded blood moon wolf curled in on himself, fearful. Titus strode closer, brow furrowed, eyes darting between Marisol and the battered enemy soldier. "What are you doing?" he demanded, an undercurrent of alarm in his voice. "He's blood moon. We should be dispatching him, not patching him up." Marisol swallowed hard, searching for a believable explanation. "He surrendered," she lied, though it wasn't exactly a surrender so much as pure desperation. "We might glean intel from him. If he dies, we learn nothing." Titus eyed the wounded wolf with distrust. "He's hardly in a condition to talk." Gideon gave explicit orders to eliminate threats. Marisol squared her shoulders, meeting Titus's gaze. "He won't be a threat if he's disarmed and restrained. Let's bring him back to the outpost. Maybe we can learn about Blood Moon's next move. If not, at least we'll keep him from warning others." A flicker of doubt crossed Titus's face. He was a seasoned warrior, but not entirely devoid of reason. "Fine," he conceded. "But if Gideon wants him gone, we obey. You know the rules." She nodded stiffly, relieved Titus hadn't pried deeper into her motives. With the older wolf's help, she hauled the injured Blood Moon soldier to his feet. He sagged between them, close to passing out. They began the slow walk back through the drizzle, each step tense with the knowledge that if an enemy patrol found them now, they would be forced into another confrontation. Alternatively, if Gideon discovered a reason to doubt Marisol's claim, it could blow open the secret she guarded so fiercely. They reached the outpost near midday. Rain-soaked and exhausted, they turned the wounded wolf over to the Nightfang medics, who worked under strict orders. They weren't known for gentle hospitality toward enemy prisoners, but at least they had the skill to keep him alive until Gideon decided his fate. Titus delivered a quick report to Beta Orin, who frowned but nodded, seemingly accepting that gleaning intel was a valid reason for sparing the prisoner. Marisol hovered just outside the makeshift infirmary, every muscle knotted with tension. She hated seeing the young man's fear. She also hated the uneasy stares from fellow wolves who disapproved of showing mercy. The day wore on. Tidings emerged that Blood Moon had retreated toward their fortress, deeper within their domain. Gideon called for a brief rest period, allowing his forces to regroup before the inevitable push. Nonetheless, the mood at the outpost was grim. Wolves circulated rumors of a looming final showdown. Some speculated that Blood Moon might attempt a last stand, while others warned of cunning infiltration attempts. Late that evening, after confirming her squad's readiness for the next day, Marisol visited the temporary infirmary. The structure was cramped, a single room in a half-collapsed building, illuminated by lanterns whose light flickered across damp stone. Moans and whimpers from injured Nightfang warriors reached her ears, though many were sedated by herbal remedies. Medics bustled about, applying poultices and bandages. In the far corner, separated from the others by thick rope restraints, lay the Blood Moon prisoner she had saved. She felt the eyes of one of the medics on her as she approached. "What do you want?" the medic asked bluntly, voice tinged with suspicion. "We've patched his wounds, but we can't guarantee he'll survive the night. The fever is taking hold." Marisol tightened her jaw. "I only want to speak with him briefly." The medic shrugged, stepping aside to continue tending a Nightfang soldier with a gash across his chest. Marisol crouched next to the Blood Moon wolf. His skin glistened with sweat, and he stared at her through half-lidded eyes. She offered a canteen of water, tilting it carefully so he could take a few sips. He coughed, each convulsion causing a tremor of pain. "You kept me alive," he rasped, voice weak. "Why?" She considered her answer, uncertain how candid she should be. Finally, she murmured, "War has taken too many. If your father or your Alpha is behind the atrocities, I want to know. You can help end this bloodshed by telling us whatever you know." A faint, humorless laugh escaped him. "You assume I know anything of consequence. We're pawns, you and I, in a feud older than we are." His eyes, glazed with fever, flicked to her face. "Your father and mine will never stop until one side is left standing." She tried to keep her voice cool. "Then how do we avoid more senseless loss?" His eyelids drooped. "Avoid it? We can't. Our alphas are set in their ways, anchored by centuries of hatred. My father used to say there's no greater honor than defending Blood Moon. But now, I wonder if the honor is worth the price." He coughed again, grimacing. "You want answers about what we plan next?" "All I can say is that if you press deeper into our territory, you'll find them waiting in the Redwood Vale. Our Alpha, the Beta, everyone left. They'll fight to the last breath." He paused, swallowing hard. "The air he's trying to keep more from dying. A few nights ago, I heard him plead with the Alpha to seek negotiation. The old man refused." Marisol's pulse quickened. So Ryland had tried to talk his father into peace. She had suspected as much, given his words in the neutral settlement. Hearing it confirmed stirred her sense of heartbreak, imagining how helpless he must have felt. She forced her expression to remain impassive. Why would he plead for peace now? Because he believes the mate bond could fix a feud that's unfixable, the wounded man said, letting out a rasping laugh that degenerated into a cough. Sweat gleamed on his brow. "He told us only a little, but it's obvious he's changed these last few weeks. Some rumored it was a mate bond with a woman from outside the pack, maybe even from your pack. I never thought it could be true, but who knows?" Marisol's throat felt dry as stone. This man was nearly delirious, but he had unwittingly hit a raw nerve that nearly made her flinch. She said nothing, unsure how to manage the rush of emotion threatening to crack her composure. The Blood Moon wolf's eyes fluttered closed for a moment. Then he forced them open, peering at her in the wavering lamplight. "But it's too late. The wheels are in motion. My father believes the bond has weakened the heir, that it's a curse from your pack meant to destroy his resolve." A wry smile twisted his lips. "That's all I know. End this war quickly if you can. He slipped into an exhausted sleep, leaving Marisol shaken. A swirl of dread and faint hope clashed in her mind. Ryland had tried to negotiate. His father saw it as a weakness. The mate bond they shared was indeed fueling rumors. Had Ryland's father guessed the truth? And if so, was Ryland standing alone against his own pack's demands for violence, just as she was struggling in secret among Nightfang? She left the infirmary, stepping out into the drizzling night. The outpost's courtyard was dark, dotted with torches that sputtered in the rain. Few wolves lingered outside, most taking shelter in the battered buildings to get what rest they could before the next move. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, as if the skies themselves lamented the ongoing bloodshed. Marisol pressed a hand to her temple, trying to absorb the significance of what the captive had revealed. Redwood Vale lay deeper in Blood Moon territory, a place where the pack might make its final stand, and Ryland was caught in that swirling maelstrom of vengeance, powerless to stop it alone. Voices reached her ears, and she ducked around a corner to find Gideon stepping out of one of the larger structures, his beta Orin by his side. Their expressions were somber. She paused, eavesdropping from the shadows. "It seems Redwood Vale is next," Gideon said. "Our scouts confirm that Blood Moon is converging there." Orin nodded. "Yes, though it's a difficult region. The valley is narrow, the trees tall and thick. They could ambush us easily. We should consider a surprise approach." Gideon frowned. "A direct assault might cost too many lives. We'll send infiltration teams ahead to weaken them, then strike in force. I won't let them outmaneuver us. Either their alpha surrenders, or we end him and his line." Marisol held her breath as Gideon paused, clenching his fists. The hardness in his voice was palpable. "We've come too far to turn back. The memory of that raised settlement weighs heavy on our pack. We'll avenge them, and all the others lost over generations." He and Orin turned away, presumably to finalize a strategy. Marisol lingered, haunted by how resolute her father sounded. If Redwood Vale became the crucible of this war, she would inevitably face Ryland again, likely for the last time. She found herself praying that some slim chance for negotiation might emerge. But Gideon wanted total victory, and Ryland's father insisted on fighting to the death. Between these two unyielding forces, she and Ryland were caught in an impossible bind. Retreating into the darkness, she sought the small space she shared with her fellow warriors in one corner of the outpost. The night weighed on her shoulders like a physical burden. Sleep would be fleeting, if it came at all. She tossed and turned on a threadbare blanket, listening to the steady drip of rain off the broken beams overhead. Her thoughts circled around Ryland's attempts at peace and her father's absolute refusal to yield. She did not want to kill him. She realized that in her bones, no matter her father's expectations. And yet, if it came down to saving her pack or saving him, the choice would be unbearable. She hated the war. She hated that she had grown up learning only how to fight. The memory of her mother, gentle and fierce, rose to the forefront of her mind. Had her mother ever wished for a different legacy? Finally, near dawn, fatigue pulled her into a shallow doze. She dreamed of Redwood Vale as a place of towering redwoods, their ancient trunks groaning under the weight of centuries of strife. In her dream, she stood in the center of that dark forest, hearing the howls of Blood Moon and Nightfang both, circling ever closer. She waited for an inevitable collision. When she turned, she saw Ryland, arms stretched out as though pleading for an end to the bloodshed. Then Gideon's roar pierced the hush, and an arrow flew. She jolted awake before seeing its impact. She pressed a hand to her thudding heart, adrenaline racing through her veins. Dawn light crept in, pale and bleak. Outside she heard the bustle of wolves preparing for another day of this brutal campaign. She exhaled sharply, forcing herself to stand and don her gear. However Redwood Vale played into their fate, she would soon find out. 2 days later, the Night Fang pack stood at the threshold of Redwood Vale, the massive forest that served as a gateway to Blood Moon's heartland. True to the medic's warnings, the captured Blood Moon soldier had slipped into delirium. No further details could be gleaned from him. Nonetheless, Gideon's scouts confirmed that Redwood Vale was heavily fortified. When Night Fang approached, they found thick barricades and hidden trenches along the valley entrance. Observers reported glimpses of patrols scouring the forest's perimeter. It was clear the Blood Moon pack intended this to be a decisive defense. The scale of Redwood Vale took Marisol's breath away. Towering conifers stretched to the sky, their colossal trunks swathed in centuries-old bark. The canopy overhead was dense, allowing only scattered beams of light to filter through. Mist clung to the forest floor, swirling around roots and fallen logs. A hush pervaded the air, heavy with anticipation. She could sense the presence of enemies, unseen but near, lurking among the trunks. Gideon convened a war council beneath a makeshift pavilion at the forest's edge. The leaders of various Night Fang squads circled a rough map carved into the dirt. Gideon pointed to a narrow game trail that curved deeper into Redwood Vale. "Our infiltration teams will slip inside under cover of darkness," he instructed. "They'll sabotage supply routes, incite chaos, and weaken Blood Moon's hold. At dawn tomorrow, the main force attacks. With any luck, their lines will be disrupted enough for us to break through." He turned to Marisol. "You will lead one of these infiltration teams, along with Titus and Selena. Another team, led by Orin, will flank from the east. You must be swift and silent. If you encounter the Blood Moon Alpha or his heir, do not hesitate. This forest will be their grave if it must." She forced her face into a mask of resolve. "Yes, Father." All day, Night Fang made final preparations. They stored rations in hidden packs, readied ropes, and prepared to move under the cloak of night. Marisol's team would consist of 10 carefully chosen wolves who excelled in stealth. As evening fell, they painted their faces with ash and mud to camouflage their scent and forms in the dimness of the forest. The tension was palpable, each wolf speaking in hushed tones, scanning the gloom for signs of movement. It felt as though Redwood Vale itself was a living entity, ancient and foreboding, holding secrets of centuries past. Just before midnight, Marisol's infiltration squad slipped into the forest. They moved in single file, each member hyper-aware of every snapping twig or rustling branch. The canopy overhead was nearly impenetrable, the moonlight reduced to faint silver patches on the mossy ground. The hush intensified, broken only by the distant chirr of night insects. A cool breeze drifted between the tree trunks, stirring shadows that almost seemed alive. Marisol led the way, spear in hand, ears straining for any sign of patrols. They navigated deeper into Redwood Vale, following the twisting path that Gideon had marked on the map. Titus brought up the rear, occasionally pausing to listen. Selena stayed near the middle, ready to fire arrows at any sudden threat. The other wolves, some in human form, some half-shifted, fanned out, scanning for hidden traps. The entire atmosphere felt weighted with dread. They knew Blood Moon would defend this place with savage devotion. At length, they spotted the glow of torches in the distance. Marisol signaled for the group to halt and take cover behind a massive fallen trunk. Peering around the rotted wood, she observed a guarded supply station nestled in a clearing. Several small huts and lean-tos were constructed hastily among the roots of giant trees. Blood Moon soldiers, armed and alert, patrolled the perimeter. A cluster of barrels and crates bore signs of weapons or provisions. Selena moved up beside Marisol. "At least 10 defenders," she whispered. "That must be a supply cache. If we destroy it, the rest of the pack's resources will be strained." Marisol nodded, mindful that Gideon's plan specifically targeted such points of vulnerability. She studied the sentry pattern, noticing a gap near the east side whenever 2 patrollers crossed paths. "We'll split. Half of us create a diversion at the northern edge. The rest will circle and set those supplies ablaze." At once, the team divided. Marisol, Selena, and 4 others crept quietly to the east. Titus and the remaining warriors flanked north. Within minutes, the quiet of Redwood Vale erupted into a distraction. A low whistle from Titus signaled the start. Then came the snap with arrow fire, and a shouted challenge. Blood Moon sentries rushed to counter what appeared to be a direct threat from the north side of the clearing. Their formation scattered, leaving the eastern flank exposed. Marisol seized the chance. She and her group slid out from behind the trunk, darting among the shadows. The torchlight flickered across the clearing, but the Blood Moon guards were now preoccupied with the diversion. One quick glance confirmed that none of these guards was Ryland. Her heart twisted at the thought of facing him here, but she forced herself to remain focused. Reaching the line of crates and barrels, Selena and another warrior began splashing flammable oil while Marisol stood guard, scanning for approaching enemies. In the confusion, one Blood Moon guard finally noticed them, letting out a startled yell. Marisol lunged forward, disarming him before he could alert the others. A swift blow to the head rendered him unconscious. Selena hissed, "Ready!" Marisol took a torch from a fallen sentry, passing it to Selena. The archer flung it onto the soaked barrels. Flames caught with a whoosh, blazing upward. In moments, the supply cache was engulfed in an inferno. Alarmed shouts rose on all sides as smoke and fire lit up the clearing. "Fall back," Marisol ordered, grabbing Selena's arm and sprinting toward the cover of the trees. The rest of the infiltration team regrouped, slipping into the dense growth just as more Blood Moon warriors arrived, too late to save their supplies from destruction. Through the flicker of flames, Marisol glimpsed furious faces, yelling frantic orders to contain the blaze. The first strike had succeeded. Titus joined them, adrenaline shining in his eyes. "That should disrupt them for a while. Are we pushing on?" Marisol nodded, glancing at the rising columns of smoke. "Yes. One more supply point lies ahead, near the old logging route. If we hit that too, the main attack at dawn will have a better chance." With careful haste, they navigated away from the clearing, guided by the faint glow of starlight through the canopy. The infiltration team pressed on, the acrid smell of smoke following them like a ghost. The forest was full of half-heard sounds, rustling leaves, the crack of branches underfoot. The hush felt charged, as if Redwood Vale watched every movement. Marisol led them deeper, until, at last, they found themselves near the old logging route. Ancient tree stumps and neglected cart tracks suggested it once served as a thoroughfare for gathering lumber. Now, it appeared to be a Blood Moon storage area, smaller than the one they'd just destroyed. She spotted a few crates near a makeshift shelter and 2 guards huddled by a tiny campfire. She signaled the others to remain hidden, then scanned the perimeter. Only 2 sentries, but more could be nearby. Tension prickled along her spine. If they made even the smallest error, the entire infiltration might collapse. She silently instructed 2 wolves to approach the guards from the right, while she, Selena, and Titus flanked from the left. The plan unfurled with smooth efficiency, until a blood moon wolf who had been scouting the shadows noticed them. He let out a sharp warning howl. The two sentries leapt up, grabbing their weapons. Marisol cursed under her breath, rushing forward to silence them before they could call for reinforcements. She ducked a swinging blade, ramming her shoulder into the startled guard. He stumbled against a pile of crates. Titus wrestled the second sentry to the ground. For a moment, it seemed they had the upper hand again. Then a furious roar echoed through the trees, and more blood moon warriors emerged, drawn by the howl. 5 or 6, at least. Their eyes gleamed with rage in the faint firelight, and some shifted halfway, teeth bared and claws ready. Marisol's infiltration team found itself outnumbered. A sense of dread surged. She could not afford a drawn-out fight. They had come to sabotage supplies, not engage in open combat. Time slowed as the Blood Moon warriors charged. Marisol spun her spear in an arc, blocking a slash from a short sword. Sparks flew where steel collided. The attacker was skilled, forcing her back step by step. On her left, Selena loosed arrows into two rushing foes, wounding one in the leg. Titus took on another, grappling him in a swirl of limbs. One of the Blood Moon warriors, a hulking figure with a scarred face, singled out Marisol. She recognized Beta Ryson, second in command of Blood Moon, and rumored to be unrelenting in battle. His eyes blazed with fury. "Night Fang filth," he snarled, swinging a massive axe. She ducked, heart hammering. If the weapon struck, it might cleave her in half. Ryson pressed his advantage, backing her against a thick tree trunk. Though battered by multiple feints, she managed to deflect the axe with her spear's shaft. The vibration jarred her arms. Another savage swing came, forcing her to pivot. She tried to keep him at a distance, but he was unnervingly quick for someone his size. Her mind raced, searching for an opening while her pulse thudded like a drum. Their blades locked momentarily. Face to face, each straining for dominance. Ryson's breath smelled of blood and sweat. "I've waited a long time to kill one of Gideon's brood," he hissed. Fury and panic welded together in her. She had no desire to die here, pinned against a tree in Redwood Vale. Summoning her training, she twisted her spear at a sharp angle and thrust upward. The tip grazed Ryson's shoulder, drawing blood. He roared in pain, staggering back just enough for her to slip free. Before he could recover, she slammed the butt of her spear into his gut. He doubled over, cursing. Relief swept through her, but only for an instant. A nearby Blood Moon wolf drew a bow, aiming for Marisol. She was vulnerable. She tried to leap aside, but the arrow was already loosed. A blur of motion intercepted the arrow. One of her teammates, a loyal Night Fang fighter named Ronan, tackled the archer. The arrow grazed Marisol's forearm instead of piercing her chest. Pain flared as she stumbled back, a trickle of blood sliding down her arm. Meanwhile, Ryson recovered, bellowing at his warriors. "Kill them! Don't let them escape!" The group closed in. Selena and Titus fought back to back, fending off multiple attackers. Marisol realized with a jolt that they were severely outnumbered and outmatched. They hadn't yet destroyed the supplies. Even if they did, how could they retreat now, with Blood Moon closing in? Her heart pounded as a swirl of frantic thoughts collided. She refused to let her team be slaughtered. An urgent decision formed in her mind. "Fall back!" she shouted, ignoring the sting in her arm. "Abandon the sabotage. We can't hold here." Without hesitation, Titus bashed his current opponent away, grabbing Selena's wrist. The rest of the Night Fang infiltration team disentangled from the brawl, drawing back through the dense undergrowth. The Blood Moon warriors pursued, snarling curses. Ryland clutched his wounded shoulder, eyes blazing with hatred, but he nonetheless gave chase. Marisol led them down the game trail, weaving between enormous trunks in the dark. Rain from earlier in the day had left the ground slick with mud, making each step treacherous. Gnawed roots threatened to trip them. She pushed forward, mindful that the deeper they ventured, the more likely they were to lose any sense of direction. The canopy overhead loomed, pressing down in suffocating gloom. "How do we escape them?" Selena panted, eyes flicking back to the silhouettes in pursuit. "We have to break line of sight," Marisol answered, voice tight. "We'll try to circle back around." They sprinted through the forest, stumbling over rocks and fallen branches. Now and then, Blood Moon howls echoed, guiding the pursuers. The infiltration mission hung on a nice edge. If they were cornered, Gideon's entire plan for a surprise dawn offensive might be compromised. Marisol refused to let her father's forces be ambushed because she had led her squad to disaster. The group reached a steep ridge carved by a shallow stream. Fog drifted among the trees, swirling in ghostly patterns. Marisol paused, peering over the ridge. A rocky drop stretched about 20 feet down to the stream below. A precarious idea formed in her mind. "We can climb down," she whispered. "It's dangerous, but it may be our only hope to lose them." Titus frowned, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. "Better than waiting here to be overrun." They moved along the ridge, searching for a less sheer section. Haste was imperative. If Blood Moon reached them now, they'd have nowhere to go. Marisol's injured arm throbbed. She pressed a hand to the wound, trying to stem the bleeding. In the silence, she heard the shuffle of boots and snapping twigs approaching from behind. The pursuers were too close. "It's now or never," she hissed, dropping to her knees and gripping a jutting rock. Slowly, she began descending. The wet stone under her fingers threatened to slip free at any second. The others followed suit, each grimacing at the precarious slope. Halfway down, she risked glancing upward. Through the swirling fog, she glimpsed shapes at the ridge above. Blood Moon wolves scanning the area. Ryland's booming voice came over the murk. "Spread out. They can't have gotten far. Find them." Marisol's heart pounded. They had precious seconds to vanish into the fog below. She dropped the last few feet, landing in a crouch near the shallow stream. The water was ice cold, lapping around her boots. Dripping ferns and dark roots cascaded along the rocky walls. Titus and Selena landed nearby, joined by the other survivors. Exchanging urgent glances, they waded downstream, hugging the canyon wall, the water splashing at their ankles. Their breath came in ragged bursts. The night air chilled their sweaty bodies. But for now, it seemed the Blood Moon pursuers had missed them. Marisol led the way, carefully rounding a bend in the stream's path. Her heart still hammered, adrenaline spiking every time a twig snapped above. Once they had put a good distance between themselves and the ridge, she motioned for the team to halt, gathering in a small hollow under a moss-laden ledge. "We'll rest here for a moment," she said quietly, pressing her injured arm. Blood still oozed from the arrow graze, but it looked manageable. The rest of the group bore bruises and cuts, yet no mortal wounds as far as she could see. "We lost the chance to sabotage that second cache, but we crippled one. Let's hope that's enough for the main attack." Selena nodded, though her expression was grim. "We nearly lost everything up there." Titus wiped sweat from his face. "Ryland is out for blood. We should get back to our lines before daylight." Marisol exhaled unsteadily. That was the best plan. The infiltration had partially succeeded now. They had to ensure Gideon received accurate intel. All right. We'll follow the stream until it curves west. According to the map, that should lead us around the blood moon lines. She rose, ignoring the ache in her muscles, guiding the squad further down the gorge. Every so often, they paused to listen, but heard only the soft gurgle of water and the faint whisper of wind among the towering trees above. The hours ticked by in tense travel. Gradually, the slope flattened and the canopy thinned, allowing a dull light to penetrate. Dawn was not far off. At last, they stumbled upon an unguarded trail leading out of the gorge. Clambering up, they emerged into a part of Redwood Vale less choked with undergrowth. Pale light filtered through the branches, signifying the approach of morning. Relief flickered in Marisol's chest. Perhaps they had evaded detection. That hope dissipated the moment they rounded a twist in the trail. A figure stepped out from behind a massive redwood trunk, sword in hand. Marisol tensed, raising her spear. Then her breath caught, recognition flashing through her. It was Ryland. He stood alone, clad in dark, travel-worn clothes. His hair was damp, strands clinging to his forehead. A fresh cut marked his left temple. In his amber eyes, she saw a storm of emotions: relief, caution, longing, confusion. She heard her wolf stir, that inner presence awakening with an ache that threatened to drop her to her knees. Her squad reacted instantly, but she signaled them to hold. She saw no sign of other Blood Moon fighters. It seemed Ryland was by himself, as if he too had been searching these woods. She swallowed past the dryness in her throat. This can't be happening now, with my entire infiltration team here. She thought desperately. Titus glared. That's the air, he hissed, voice low. We can't let him escape. Selena already knocked an arrow, tension humming in the bowstring. Marisol's heart hammered with brutal intensity. No one else in the squad knew she had encountered Ryland countless times in secret. They only saw a golden opportunity to fulfill Gideon's highest demand. She forced her expression into a neutral mask. Stand down, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. If we make noise, the rest of Blood Moon will find us. Ryland lifted his empty hand, a gesture of caution. I came to find you, he said, his voice unsteady in the hush of the forest. I sensed your presence in Redwood Vale. Marisol resisted the urge to glance at her teammates. She could feel their shock radiating in the tense silence. My father has a full force at the edge of this forest, she warned, keeping her tone quiet but urgent. If you linger, you'll be caught in the dawn attack. His gaze darted to the infiltration squad. He recognized Titus and Selena from the outpost battle, and they regarded him with hostility. We know about the attack, he said. Our scouts spotted your father's troops. My father is determined to fight. Nothing I say can change him. Bitterness twisted Marisol's insides. She had dreaded hearing those words, the final confirmation that Blood Moon would not bow. Then many more will die. You should go. This place is about to become a slaughter. Titus tensed. Why are we letting him just walk away? Marisol, this is our chance, Ryland interrupted with quiet urgency. I don't want your people or mine to keep killing each other. Please, can't we speak, just for a moment, away from the others? The infiltration squad exchanged incredulous looks. Selena's arrow remained aimed at his chest. Why would we do that? Selena demanded. We have no reason to trust you. Because this war is bigger than either side, Ryland answered, pained determination brimming in his voice. If I can't stop my father, perhaps you can help me find a path we haven't seen yet. Marisol felt the eyes of her squad. Titus shook his head in disbelief. We should end him right here. Think of how many Nightfang lives that would save. She stood rooted to the spot, grappling with a maelstrom of loyalty, fear, and the bond that tugged her inexorably toward Ryland. If she gave the order to kill him, that would fulfill her father's deepest desire, perhaps even tip the war irreversibly in Nightfang's favor. Yet the thought of Ryland's blood on her hands ignited an almost unbearable agony in her chest. She blinked, remembering how he had tried to defend his pack, but also speak for peace. Would this be her last chance to break a cycle of violence older than them both? She exhaled a shaky breath. Lower your weapons, she whispered to Selena and Titus. No one fires unless he attacks first. Anger flared in Selena's eyes. Marisol, this is madness. Follow my lead, Marisol snapped, voice steely. That's an order. Reluctantly, Selena eased the tension in her bowstring, though she kept an arrow nocked. Titus looked torn, but ultimately stepped back. The others hovered in confusion, ready to defend their leader if Ryland made a move. Marisol turned to him, catching the flicker of gratitude and concern in his gaze. We don't have much time, she said. What do you want? He swallowed, glancing at the infiltration squad. Clearly, he couldn't speak freely in front of so many hostile ears. I understand why your pack is here, to avenge old wounds. My father plans to meet your alpha in the center of Redwood Vale, Equate. Daybreak. It will be a bloodbath, but if we could get them to parley just for an hour perhaps. Marisol cut him off with a bitter laugh. My father would never parley when we have the advantage. And your father wants no part in peace. Face it, Ryland, they will fight to the last breath. She used his name without realizing it, and Titus's eyes widened. He must have wondered how she knew it. A new wave of tension swept the squad. Marisol's pulse soared, feeling the precariousness of her position. She prayed no one pressed the issue yet. Ryland's jaw flexed. I won't deny it, but maybe a neutral third party can force a temporary ceasefire. The alpha of the Stormclaw pack is close to Redwood Vale. He's old, wise, and both Nightfang and Bloodmoon have recognized him as an impartial arbiter in small disputes. Marisol shook her head. There's no time to bring in a mediator. Dawn is almost here. The armies are already poised to strike. Ryland's shoulders sagged, and defeat clouded his features. Then we face utter carnage. I can't stand by and watch our packs destroy each other. If I can't convince my father, I may have to challenge him for leadership. It's an ancient right, but I'll need Nightfang to hold back while I make that attempt. Otherwise, we'll be overrun. A stunned silence fell. A challenge for leadership was a rare event. Werewolf law allowed a direct challenge for the alpha position, but it demanded the challenger be strong enough to either kill or subdue the alpha in single combat. An idea fraught with danger. If Ryland lost, his father would tear him apart, and if Ryland somehow succeeded, Bloodmoon would have to accept him as the new alpha. Only then could he propose negotiations. Titus snorted, scornful. You expect us to just wait for you to fight your father? That's insane. Maybe, Ryland said, eyes flicking to Marisol. But maybe it's our only chance at peace. Her mind spun. This is impossible. Could she truly convince Gideon to delay an attack, even briefly, so Ryland could challenge his father? Such a suggestion sounded absurd. Gideon had a personal vendetta. He wanted to see the Bloodmoon Alpha pay for every drop of blood spilled. Why would he grant them any reprieve? Yet the alternative was a pitched battle that might obliterate both packs. She remembered the funeral pyres, the grieving families, the severed alliances, and the wounded soldiers' words about the heir trying to do right. Her heart twisted in her chest. She didn't know if she believed Ryland could successfully unseat his father, or even if that would truly bring peace. But the bond pulsed, urging her to try. At least if I attempt it, I can say I didn't stand idle. The weight of Titus's skeptical gaze pricked her conscience. He might consider her loyalty compromised if she even voiced the idea. Yet in her bones, she knew that continuing blindly toward slaughter would solve nothing. Her team hovered on the brink of aggression. Ryland stood only a few steps away, waiting with held breath. She forced herself to speak, voice low. My father will be suspicious if I ask for a truce. He wants you dead, Ryland. You know that. His lips pressed together. I do. And if we fail, we'll both be facing each other on the battlefield. She drew in a shaky breath, making her decision. I'll try to get him to hold back for a short time. No promises beyond that. Even uttering the words felt like plunging a blade into everything she had been taught. Titus swore, stepping forward. Marisol, you can't be serious. She leveled him with a fierce glare. We came here to sabotage supplies and weaken their lines for the dawn attack. We succeeded with one target and nearly died at the second. Now, look around. Redwood Vale is a death trap. You've seen how many of them hide among the trees. Our losses will be catastrophic even if we win. We can at least consider an alternative. That alternative is letting the heir live, Selena said tersely. Which Gideon specifically forbade. And since when do you know his name? Marisol felt the ground tilting under her feet, her secret dangerously close to exposure. Panic fluttered in her stomach, but she refused to back down. Focus on the bigger picture, she said, injecting authority into her tone. If the Blood Moon heir can challenge his father and stop the war, we spare both packs from more suffering. You may doubt him, but we lose nothing by giving him a few hours. If he fails, we fight anyway, and will do what Gideon demands. But if he succeeds, maybe we can end this feud before it devours everyone. Her words hung in the air, echoing among the towering redwoods. She was offering a sliver of hope, albeit a fragile one. Titus remained stone-faced, but he lowered his eyes, considering. Selena stared at Ryland with distrust, yet her bow remained lowered. The other wolves exchanged uneasy looks, evidently torn between loyalty to Gideon and the common-sense dread of a final battle in Redwood Vale. I'm not convinced, Titus muttered. But I follow your orders, Marisol, because I trust you. Just know that if Gideon finds out we had the heir in our grasp and let him go, there will be repercussions. She nodded grimly. Then let's keep this to ourselves for now. We'll head back. I'll speak to Gideon alone, with whatever rationale I can muster. She glanced at Ryland. Do what you must on your end. If you can truly challenge your father, then do so quickly. My father's patience will be non-existent. Ryland exhaled, relief mingling with deep anxiety. He stepped forward, as though intending to speak more privately to her. Immediately, Selena tensed, and Titus reached for his weapon. Marisol raised a hand to stop them. Though her heart pounded with the force of 1,000 drums, she held her ground, letting Ryland approach. For a brief, trembling moment, he lowered his voice so only she could hear. If this fails, and we meet on the battlefield at dawn, please remember that I never wanted this war, he said, his gaze burning into hers. And know that, For me, this bond is real. I'll fight for my pack, but I won't raise a blade against you if I can help it." She swallowed hard. "I can't make that promise," she whispered, the words tearing at her soul. "My father will be watching. If I hesitate, it could mean the end for me." Anguish flashed in his eyes. "I understand." They lingered for a heartbeat, a chasm of heartbreak and longing stretching between them, filled by the echo of countless dead. Finally he stepped back, and she turned to her squad, forcing her shoulders to straighten. "Move out," she commanded. "We have a battle to avert, or to fight." Without another word, Ryland vanished into the undergrowth, swift as a ghost in the mist. The infiltration team stood in subdued silence, battered and uncertain. Marisol avoided their gazes, knowing a rift of distrust might be forming. But for now, they heeded her leadership. They retreated through Redwood Vale, eventually reaching the Nightfang lines at the forest's edge by dawn. The night's tribulations weighed heavily on them all. When they arrived at the makeshift command center, Gideon and Orin waited with an air of grim anticipation. The Alpha's eyes flicked over Marisol's group, noting their wounds and exhausted expressions. "What happened? Did you succeed?" he demanded, scanning the horizon as though expecting an ambush. Marisol straightened, meeting his gaze. "We managed to burn one major supply cache. Blood Moon discovered us at the second. We had to retreat or risk losing the entire team." She gestured to her bandaged arm and the bruises on her comrades. "They're heavily fortified inside Redwood Vale. They'll be ready by the time you move. Father, we'll lose a lot of wolves if we rush in blindly." He clenched his fists. "That's war, Marisol. We didn't come here to parley." She took a breath, steeling herself for the greatest risk she had ever taken. "At least consider the possibility of limiting losses on both sides." "Maybe a short postponement." Gideon cut her off with a furious glare. "Postponement? Are you out of your mind? Blood Moon is vulnerable. We can strike them down now. Another day, and they might regroup." She forced her voice into something resembling calm. "We've disrupted some of their supplies. That blow will hurt them. A direct assault might be more dangerous than you realize. Redwood Vale is an ideal place for an ambush." Anger flushed Gideon's face. "I've already made up my mind. At sunrise, we advance." He turned to the assembled war parties, barking orders to finalize formations. Disappointment weighed on Marisol's chest. She clenched her jaw, fighting the urge to reveal Ryland's plan outright. She could guess how Gideon would respond, most likely with mockery or punishment for suggesting a delay to accommodate the Blood Moon heir. Yet if she remained silent, the war would unfold in carnage. She hovered on the brink, uncertain. At that moment, shouts rose near the perimeter. Nightfang scouts rushed toward the command center. "Blood Moon is approaching," one cried. "A group of them, led by you, their heir. It looks like a challenge or parley. We can't tell which." Gideon snarled, stepping forward with a savage gleam in his eyes. "This is it, then. They think they can surprise us." He waved an arm, and Nightfang warriors rushed to form a defensive line. "If they come in small numbers, we'll slaughter them quickly." Marisol's heartbeat galloped. Could Ryland truly be bringing a delegation to try negotiations, or challenge his father publicly? She sensed the momentum of events rushing like a river around her. While Nightfang warriors formed rank, she sprinted to a vantage point overlooking the plain where Redwood Vale thinned into open ground. The sky had lightened with dawn, offering faint visibility through the mist. She saw them, 8 or 9 wolves advancing slowly from the forest edge, carrying no drawn weapons. The one at the forefront was undoubtedly Ryland, shoulders taut, eyes scanning the mass of Night Fang fighters. His expression was grim but resolute. Her father and Orin, flanked by a contingent of Night Fang elites, stalked forward to meet them. Tension crackled like a live current in the air. Marisol hurried to her father's side, chest tight. Gideon didn't spare her a glance. His attention was fixed on the Blood Moon group. "Your father is not with you," Gideon growled when they were within earshot. Ryland stood firm. "He waits in Redwood Vale. I came to speak on behalf of Blood Moon." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "Speak. You have nothing I wish to hear, boy. Your pack butchered my allies and has opposed Night Fang for too long. The time for words is past. Where is your father, hiding behind the trees?" A ripple of laughter ran through the Night Fang ranks. Marisol bit her lip, hearing the malice in her father's voice. She felt the weight of Ryland's gaze flick toward her, but she couldn't meet his eyes with so many wolves watching. He drew a breath. Night Fang is strong, and Blood Moon has endured. Neither side wants to yield, but enough blood has been spilled. He lifted his chin, voice echoing with unwavering resolve. "I intend to challenge my father for leadership of Blood Moon. If I win, I will call for a treaty. I ask that you hold your full assault until I have the chance to do so." A collective hush swept through the assembled wolves. Gideon's expression hardened further, brimming with mockery. "You want me to stand aside while you commit treason against your own father? And how do I know this isn't a trick to buy time?" "You don't," Ryland admitted, meeting Gideon's glare. "But if I lose, you'll face the same alpha you've always known, and nothing changes. If I win, I'll have the authority to negotiate a truce. Is that not worth a short delay to save your wolves from a needless slaughter in Redwood?" "Vale?" The hush persisted, broken only by a few Night Fang warriors murmuring among themselves. Marisol's heart thundered. She desperately wanted to speak, to encourage Gideon to accept. But the Alpha's pride was legendary. He loathed anything that smelled of stalling. She watched her father's lips curl into a sneer. "You think so highly of yourself?" Gideon spat. "Your father is a monster. If you challenge him, you'll die at his hands. Then I'll march into Redwood Vale and finish off the rest. Why should I give you that courtesy? I can strike now, destroy you here, and force your father into Far. The open." Marisol mustered her courage, stepping forward. "Father, with respect," she said, addressing Gideon loud enough for the assembled wolves to hear. "If we attack them in Redwood Vale, we'll be walking into a potential massacre. Our infiltration team saw their defenses. We might win, but many will fall. If the Blood Moon heir can truly challenge his father, maybe we can avoid further tragedy. A short delay costs us little more than a few hours." Gideon turned on her, outrage flashing in his eyes. His voice dropped, though it still carried to many ears. "Why are you suddenly so eager to spare them? Have you lost your taste for vengeance?" She swallowed. "I haven't forgotten the families we lost or the settlement they raised. But a prudent alpha seeks advantage in the long game. Their alpha is cunning. If his own son weakens him, that benefits us. We won't have to shed as much Night Fang blood." She chose her words carefully, appealing to strategic sense rather than mercy. "Let him try. If he fails, we're no worse off. If he succeeds, Blood Moon might be more open to negotiation. Either way, we have the upper hand." A flicker of calculation crossed Gideon's gaze. He seemed to weigh her argument, though suspicion still darkened his expression. Finally he ground out, "You have until midday. If you haven't unseated your father by then, we proceed with the offensive." Ryland exhaled, relief shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, voice edged with sincerity. "I won't waste the opportunity." Gideon raised a hand. "Don't thank me, boy. I only gave you rope to hang yourself." He gestured to the redwood veil. "Now get out of my sight before I change my mind." Ryland nodded, motioning for the Blood Moon wolves with him to withdraw. As they turned, his gaze flickered to Marisol, offering the faintest hint of gratitude. Her chest tightened. Then they disappeared into the forest's mist, presumably to confront the Blood Moon Alpha and stage the challenge. A chorus of whispers spread through Nightfang's ranks. Some saw Gideon's concession as cunning strategy. Others viewed it as an insult to the memories of the dead. Gideon addressed them, voice ringing with authority. "We march at midday if that fool fails. Prepare yourselves. Either he kills his father and begs for our favor, or we crush them all. Our vengeance will be served." The wolves howled in agreement, their bloodlust barely tempered by the fleeting ceasefire. Marisol closed her eyes briefly, relief and fear warring in her. She had played a dangerous game by speaking up. If Ryland failed, the day would end in carnage anyway. But this was their only chance, however slim, to break the cycle before it escalated to near genocide. In the ensuing hours, the Nightfang forces remained stationed at the edge of Redwood Vale, set up in a tense waiting formation. Scouts roamed the perimeter. Archers kept watch from vantage points, ready to loose arrows at any sign of betrayal. Gideon paced among his warriors, bristling with impatience. Marisol hovered nearby, each minute feeling like a lifetime. The morning sunlight pierced the mist gradually, casting long, eerie shadows across the forest floor. Shortly before midday, distant howls resonated from within Redwood Vale. The Nightfang scouts craned their necks, straining to interpret the calls. Marisol sensed an abrupt shift in the atmosphere, a crackle of intensity rippling through the trees. Gideon barked orders, preparing the pack for battle in case the parley was a ruse. Dozens of Nightfang wolves readied weapons and took up positions, forming a formidable line. At last, movement stirred along the forest edge. A lone Blood Moon wolf appeared, staggering out into the clearing. He stumbled, then shifted to human form, panting in exertion. Nightfang fighters tensed, but Gideon raised a hand, indicating they should hold. Marisol recognized the man as one of the few who had accompanied Ryland earlier that morning. Blood spattered his clothes. His eyes held both shock and fierce excitement. He lifted his voice to call across the clearing. "The challenge is done! The Alpha, he's fallen!" A ripple of disbelief swept the Nightfang ranks. Gideon's lips curved into a sardonic half-smile, whether from triumph or skepticism. "Are we to believe the heir succeeded?" The Blood Moon messenger nodded vigorously, staggering forward. "He fought his father at the old druidic circle in Redwood Vale. It was brutal, but Yeshi won. He's Alpha now." The man coughed, wincing from some unseen wound. "And he requests safe passage to discuss terms." Gideon looked stunned, but he quickly concealed it beneath a veneer of cold calculation. "He wants to talk," he repeated, voice carrying to all present. "I'll talk if it means an end to this war. But I will not let him come here unprotected. We meet halfway, under watch." Before anyone could question it, Gideon swept his gaze over the clearing, letting out a curt bark of command. Warriors hurried to assemble, forming a ring at the forest's edge. Marisol sensed the magnitude of this moment. She stepped forward, quietly taking up a position near her father. Inwardly, she quaked with anxiety. He did it. Ryland actually did it. She had never expected him to succeed in single combat against his father, a notoriously cruel alpha. Yet fate had swung the blade in Ryland's favor. Night Fang wolves and Blood Moon wolves began converging in an uneasy semicircle in the clearing. Gideon placed himself at the center, accompanied by Orin and Marisol, among others. On the Blood Moon side, battered wolves helped carry injured compatriots, though a handful stood tall, wearing expressions of awe and uncertainty. Slowly, the ring parted, and Ryland emerged. He was spattered with blood, his steps heavy but sure. A deep slash marred his torso, still seeping crimson. Despite his wounds, he carried himself with the undeniable aura of an alpha. The hush was absolute. Gideon folded his arms, looking unimpressed, but Marisol detected the flicker of respect in her father's eyes. Ryland inclined his head. "It's done," he said in a resonant voice. "My father fought fiercely, but I stood firm. In the end he fell to his own arrogance." No Blood Moon wolves refuted the statement, though grief and confusion lingered in their gazes. Some still trembled, torn between loyalty to the old alpha and acceptance of their new leader. Ryland steadied himself, ignoring the pain that clearly racked his body. "You've demanded our surrender," he said to Gideon, "and I understand why. You have the advantage, and our pack is wounded. But I ask for a truce, a binding treaty that spares more bloodshed. In exchange, I will ensure Blood Moon ceases all hostility toward Night Fang. We will withdraw from contested borders and abide by new territorial lines that we negotiate today." Night Fang warriors stirred, exchanging looks. The vow was unprecedented. Gideon regarded Ryland with suspicion. "I have no guarantee you'll keep your word." Ryland's jaw tightened. "I'm alpha now. My word is law for Blood Moon. If any defy me, they answer for it. In that same spirit, I ask that you refrain from attacking us. Let us bury our dead, rebuild what has been lost. We can craft a formal accord for mutual non-aggression." He paused, drawing in a ragged breath, clearly pushing himself to remain upright despite his injuries. "I won't pretend centuries of hatred can vanish overnight, but we can begin a new path." Marisol studied Gideon's expression, sensing the swirl of conflicting feelings in her father. He had wanted the old alpha's head, and indeed, the man was now dead. Was that not enough vengeance? The cycle could end here. She stepped forward carefully, mindful that every eye was on them. "Father," she spoke softly, "if we continue fighting, more Night Fang lives will be lost. Their alpha has fallen. Blood Moon stands ready to yield. Please. We can bring about the peace our ancestors never achieved. That is, true victory." Gideon's gaze flickered to her, then back to Ryland. The tension stretched unbearably. At last he let out a slow exhale. "You speak of peace. Perhaps the gods finally intervened in our wretched feud." His voice echoed across the clearing, addressing both packs. "The old alpha is gone, but memories of Blood Moon cruelty run deep. If I grant your request, it will be because I choose to protect my pack from further losses, not because I trust you." Ryland gave a slight nod, understanding how tenuous the acceptance was. "That is enough. We can work toward trust over time." Silence reigned. Then Gideon made a sharp gesture, indicating that the pack lower their weapons. "Night Fang will not attack," he declared, voice carrying to all present. "We will negotiate safe boundaries, territory rights, and reparations for the damage you have caused. If you fail to honor these terms, we will finish what we started here." The threat hung in the air like a razor's edge. Ryland held his ground. "Agreed." A chorus of hushed whispers rippled among both packs, many uncertain how to feel about a peace so abruptly forged after generations of war. Marisol's heart thundered with relief so profound it almost brought her to her knees. A calmness settled over Redwood Vale that had been absent for years, like the lifting of a curse. She looked at Ryland, who wore an exhausted expression, relief mingling with the pain of his wounds. For a moment their eyes met, charged with recognition. A silent vow passed between them. They had defied the bloody legacy of their fathers to carve out something new. In the days that followed, the two packs hashed out the initial treaty. Negotiators met at the edge of Redwood Vale, supervised by both alphas. The process was hardly smooth. Mutual suspicions flared. Old grudges refused to vanish overnight. Several arguments nearly shattered the fragile peace. But whenever hostilities threatened to resurface, Ryland and Marisol stepped forward, guiding their people toward compromise. Gideon saw how fiercely his daughter pressed for a lasting accord, and though suspicion lingered, he let her take an influential role in the talks. Ryland, newly established as Alpha, used what authority he had to keep the more vengeful members of Blood Moon in check. Word of their unexpected treaty spread. Smaller wolf packs in the region watched with astonishment. Many had known only the endless cycle of Nightfang Blood Moon battles. Some called it a miracle. Others predicted the truce would collapse before the next moon. For Marisol and Ryland, each day was a balancing act, proving their loyalty to their own packs while hiding the deeper truth of their connection. And yet, the act of forging peace forced them to share quiet moments, discussing territory lines and exchanging updates on wounded wolves. Marisol felt the bond pulsing whenever they were near, an invisible tether that had, in some strange way, made this new era possible. One evening, after hours of tense negotiations, Marisol wandered away from the main camp that the packs had established between Redwood Vale and Nightfang's outpost. The sky was painted with the crimson and gold hues of sunset. She found a secluded spot by a stream, surrounded by the hush of towering trees. She dipped her fingers in the cool water, letting the forest's serenity envelop her. Distant murmurs of camp activity floated on the breeze. Suddenly, soft footsteps approached. Ryland emerged from behind a cluster of ferns, his posture unsure. "I saw you slip away," he said quietly. "Is it all right if I join you?" She nodded, gesturing for him to sit beside her on a fallen log. They had never before dared to meet so openly. But with a ceasefire in place, and more pressing tasks occupying both packs, it was easier to slip a moment alone, if only briefly. For a while, neither spoke, content to let the forest's evening chorus fill the silence. Eventually, Ryland broke the hush. "The treaty is taking shape. Both packs will remain armed, but we've agreed on new borders. My father's expansions will be reversed, and your father's demands for restitution are harsh, but manageable." He rubbed his bandaged torso, still healing from the mortal combat that had ended the old Alpha's reign. "I think about how we got here, through the bond, through secrets, through risk. A month ago, this would have seemed impossible." Marisol looked at him, heart aching with gratitude, regret, and 1,000 unnamed emotions. "You challenged your father and won. I'm not sure many wolves would have had the courage. Are you doing all right?" He exhaled, glancing at the stream. "It wasn't just me. My father was strong, but his leadership had cost the pack too much. Some of them supported me, and knowing you believed in me gave me the final push." His voice caught, though he tried to hide it. He lifted his eyes to hers. "I'm sorry for all the suffering that still lingers between our packs. But I hope this is the beginning of something better." She reached over, placing her hand gently atop his. The quiet contact steadied her. I hope so too. But what about us? We're the Alpha's heir, and the Alpha's daughter of two packs who have waged war for generations. If we reveal the bond, we risk inciting an uproar on both sides. He turned his hand to lace their fingers together, expression tender yet determined. Maybe we keep it hidden until peace is stronger. For now, that might be wisest. In time, our people may accept that fated mates can cross old boundaries. A note of uncertainty crept into his voice. I won't push you. I know you carry your father's expectations. She squeezed his hand, finding solace in his warmth. I'll still have to prove to Gideon that my loyalty remains with Nightfang, but he's less suspicious now that the war is ending in our favor. One day, maybe he can see that loving you doesn't mean betraying my pack. His eyes shone with quiet joy, and they leaned closer, foreheads nearly touching. That moment felt like an oasis amid all the turmoil, a promise that they could build something beyond the hatred that had shackled their ancestors. The forest glimmered in the sunset, and the soft sound of the stream acted as witness to the vow forged in their entwined hands. Time would test them. The scars of war did not vanish overnight, and some wolves in both packs would never forgive the blood already spilled. But a new era had dawned, shaped by the unprecedented alliance of two who had been born enemies, but bound by fate. Marisol knew challenges lay ahead, days when the weight of leadership would strain them both. Yet she found hope in Ryland's unwavering resolve, and in the steady pulse of the bond that had begun as an impossible burden, and ended by shattering centuries of violence. In the crimson twilight, they remained for a while longer, listening to the wind sigh through the trees, cherishing their first peaceful sunset in a world no longer overshadowed by endless bloodshed. And though uncertain of the future, they held on to the belief that love, forged in the crucible of war, might indeed be stronger than any ancient feud.